The T3 stack is not for blogs. Static content should use static frameworks that build high quality static sites. If you're building an application, this is one of the hardest to beat stacks for it.
I've been working on a game. It is a web-based game. If I had to describe it in 2 words, sometimes I tell people it's emo Pokemon. And that's you can go check it out if you like. It's called Void Pet. And I never thought I'd be a game developer, but now I'm a game developer working on a company that's doing a game, and that's my life now.
People aren't clicking CS videos, but if you get their attention by putting a hot girl at the beginning and then hold their attention with a jarring shift in a moment, that you can make them watch something they might not have clicked on, even though it entertains them. Howdy, y'all.
World.
Quite a guest we got today. I could introduce you, but I'm sure you can do a much better and funnier job. Would you like to tell the world who you are, Ben?
That's a great question. I usually tell people that I'm a software person who has a special love for the React framework, and I do videos on YouTube and TikTok, and in my spare time, well, not really in my spare time, I actually make content is actually what I actually do. But I also usually am running some sort of startup or something of the sort, or making some wacky project.
Very relatable for me as someone who went the opposite direction, but has done all of the same things. Yeah, I'd love to talk all about your history with dev, going into creating, and then going into startup land. I think it'll be really interesting, like comparing, contrasting our experiences there and how we've kind of ended up in the same spot.
Yeah, what do you do for your intro when people don't know you? What do you say?
It depends on where I am and like who I'm talking with. Like if it's a creator conversation, I usually start with my history working at Twitch, my like audio background and stuff there. If it's more general, like who is Theo? I'm a skateboarder that got too hurt to keep skateboarding, so I started writing code because it seemed cool, and suddenly I'm running a company. And if it's like the company journey, like how I like the Y Combinator type stuff, it's, I worked at Twitch for half a decade. I built a lot of stuff there, realized I couldn't build for the people I cared about, so I quit to go do that, and here I am. But yeah, there's too many pieces to tell one story, so I just pick a set of pieces depending on what narrative I want to tell.
Fun fact, I never really did much skating, skateboarding, but I did rollerblading for a bit. And that was like ripstick. Those were my 2 things I did.
Not the ripstick. Rollerblading's
having the ripstick was great.
Rollerblading's having a huge comeback right now for what it's worth, but the ripstick died a hard death.
Yeah, it kind of did. That's okay. It was a good kid activity, and then like, who wants to like swivel when you're adult? Not really.
Yeah, totally fair. I've seen people do kickflips and triflips on them. I managed to pull a shove it on one once, but yeah, I'm too into the technical, like what can I do with it, not just can I get around with it. And the thing I loved about the skateboard for me is I could go in my basement in the middle of the winter and make up a new trick on it. And the feeling of like doing something no one had ever done before was super powerful. And all you had to do was eat shit a few thousand times. And when I realized it's the same thing as code. Yeah.
That's the scary thing. Yeah, except, I guess my inside is like wounded when I code, but skateboarding, like my outside is wounded when I'm like, just flopping. I did pennyboard, and I actually did get wounded pennyboarding once, which I was very sad about. I got like a scar on my elbow when I fell, but that was just from regular skating because I was a noob and going too fast.
Funny, but like most of my scars are from bikes, actually. No, I'm not even a biker, but yeah, I've broken enough bones skateboarding. I can't talk shit.
I've luckily never broken a bone, but the main sport I played was tennis, and that's like the most docile sport. So you gotta like try to break something there.
Yeah, I feel like I shouldn't say just happened to. I didn't like team sports, not because like teams are bad, but the lack of like creativity offered. Like you're working within a specific range of things and your quality is measured by numbers very trivially. And that was very, very frustrating and boring to me. I just wanted to do weird shit. Like I'm a dumb musician, artist, dude. And like
that sounds like you were the weakest person on the team and you had the lowest metrics, and so you hated it.
Not wrong, but it was more my favorite moments like at basketball practice with my friends were like playing dumb games of horse and seeing who could like get a good shot like backwards and stuff like that. And when I realized skateboarding was literally just that, but as a sport,
Trick shots.
yeah, trick shots. And I realized that's tricks. And what I realized with software dev is it's that again. Sure, there are people who are going to go and measure every single number and thing they can, but I just want to build weird, cool shit.
Are you the type of person that, I guess, let me rephrase it. Do you use your YouTube analytics? And if so, how do you use them?
Yes. I've talked about this a bit before, but this whole channel is more an experiment for me than anything. It's market research. I wanted to better understand the creator space that I've been working in and like cared this much about for so long. And the opportunity I had with the channel was to better understand it, see what problems creators had every day and how they like resolved them. And what I learned quickly is that the problems we solved at Ping are not the problems that are top of mind for creators every day. And there's a whole huge set of additional things that we want to go build now. And a lot of like what I do for the channel and how I use the analytics is to better understand what it takes to be successful on YouTube and to better understand the problems that creators feel every day. And the next grind, I think I've touched on this a bit before too, starting October 1st, so tomorrow, we're going to go for daily uploads on the channel. And I think we can do it, but I want to see how painful it is. Do you know of any software dev channels that have pulled off daily uploads? Because I think this will be the first one.
I did it for about a year, but it was under like a very different format because at the time it was very much like I'd sit down and like do a coding tutorial and it like would be a chunk of a coding tutorial. And so it might be like 3 months before the like Slack clone was finished, but you'd get like one part of the Slack clone like every day for 3 months. So it was a thing I did for a bit, well, a year, which is like a little longer than a bit. I mean, the TLDR is you have to find something that is something sustainable that you can do daily. And sometimes the thing that you do sustainable and that you can do daily is not actually either what like fits your goals or like does what you want. For me, it did fit my goals for a very long time because I got very comfortable making tutorials. But then there was a point in time where like, yeah, I don't need to do daily tutorial uploads anymore. And it is exhausting and also just didn't serve what I wanted to do anymore. But yeah, to your question, I have never seen anyone really do it because I think it like is extra hard if you do like tech because you can't just do, because you're like trying to like put like good information in there. Especially if you're like doing other crap with your life. Cause like there's like Graham Stephan's like the closest thing I can think of it that does like a similar schedule for finance. And I like it's kind of like that.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. I've definitely felt the like, what am I going to fill the space with? And do I have to change the content like type I'm doing to hit the daily like goal? The way we've been doing it so far, and I've gotten content booked for the next 3 weeks. So I hope this is sustainable. We'll learn quickly if it's not. I do one stream, sometimes 2 a week. That's 4 to 6 hours. I plan a bunch of topics ahead of time and I go out of my way to gun through at least 7 a stream so we can chop those and make those all videos. I also have the interviews that I do ideally at least once a week that can be the whole interview that's uploaded, and then we can take chunks out of that too for interesting moments. It's like I'm doing what, yeah, it should be 4 channels is what I should be doing, but I want to see what happens if I flood one channel with 5 types of content that are like in the same circle. And then I'm going to break it up and see what happens from that too. Because I want to understand the algorithms and how YouTube's doing all these things. And I feel like I'm at a loss right now. And every time I do something stupid like this, I learn so much.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes for you. Because theoretically, I believe it should be okay. Because right now, YouTube suggestions are like the primary thing that drives traffic. And they should be finding who likes your video and like figuring that out, even if it's on the same channel. Theoretically, that's how it should work. I don't know in actuality if how that'll pan out. I imagine it's going to be fine. How are you doing much shorts content, or do you clip and it's horizontal stuff?
We are experimenting with shorts. My shorts editor has quickly become the main channel editor, so he's been doing as many shorts recently. But the only place I've gotten good like viewership on short form vertical content has been Twitter. I tried TikTok and YouTube. I think that the viewers we're aiming for are a bit too senior, and
that makes sense. I don't think anyone, I think as the higher you go up in like age, the less people are usually in general watching the vertical content, I imagine, but that's just merely a guess.
Yeah, I am very curious about your TikTok come up. It's something that I've been fascinated by for a while because I don't feel like you you dumbed down your content, like you changed it and made it work there. But yeah, how did TikTok happen for you?
Yeah, you could kind of say it's dumbed down, but also at the same time, yeah, it is kind of just like very different. I mean, to me, it was a transition that happened kind of slowly. Um, that at first I was making the same content I was making on YouTube on TikTok. And I found, like you did, there's less senior people on TikTok, at least when I was posting. And so they do not know what coding is on TikTok. A lot of the people, they did not know what HTML was, and they did not laugh when I said HTML is not a programming language, or it is a programming language. Like, these are just like the concepts that are like, what even is HTML? Like, what's a website? Like, you got to go like one level different. I quickly learned, and the combination of that, and they don't even want you to sit there and explain HTML to them. Like, they if you ask somebody if they want any coding content, whatever, they're gonna tell you no. But if you package the coding content that looks kind of similar to the content they're already consuming, and all of a sudden there's like a tidbit of comp sci in there, then they're like, okay, that's kind of like quirky and cool. There's like comp sci content. Like, I've always wanted to learn to code. Look, there's like this one bit of coding in there. So I think that's like the insight that I found that worked very well, was, and like over time, just making lots of different coding content. I just tried to make coding fun, if you will, or like not even fun. I tried to make coding content that somebody would watch that didn't care about coding. That was like my goal. And I tried lots of things. And one thing I noticed is people liked watching girls on TikTok. So like, what if I stitch? And stitching is like, you take a part of somebody else's video. So like, what if I take a part of this girl's video and I put at the beginning of mine, and then I talk about coding at the end. So all of a sudden you're getting that like thing you're used to. And then there's like some coding bit like intertwined with that. And that was like the first thing that worked very well. Um, and then I just like, yeah, I mean, the short answer is I learned the TikTok meta, and I like tried to warp it to CS slowly but surely. And then over time, it got less and less CS, as you might imagine. The mainstream is like less and less into CS. And that's kind of just what happened. That's like the journey of how we got here, you know?
That makes a ton of sense. I saw a Hank Green video he quickly filmed when he was at the YouTube Summit a few days ago that's been melting my brain since, because I think a lot about like
Yep.
the relationship between these platforms. What he said, the big difference between YouTube, like traditional videos, like horizontal, like thumbnails you click, versus shorts and TikTok, is that with
Yep.
a traditional YouTube video, the viewer picks what to watch. With TikTok and shorts, the viewer picks when to stop watching. So you
That's
make
very
content
interesting. Yeah.
that might not necessarily be clickable, but holds their attention for as long as possible. Versus on YouTube, you have to make the most clickable content and then hold their attention.
Right. There's no thumbnail anymore.
Yeah. And the difference there.
Like,
And like you can do entirely different types of content you might not have been able to otherwise, because as long as you can keep them interested for that first 5 seconds and then hold their attention decently strong from there, you win.
right.
So I think that really complements your point of like, people aren't clicking CS videos, but if you get their attention by putting a hot girl at the beginning and then hold their attention with a jarring shift in a moment, that you can make them watch something they might not have clicked on, even though it entertains them.
I'd agree with that. I think also you can make it work with YouTube in a different way, because like Michael Reeves does a really good job of this, where his videos are very comp sci. Like, he'll even show code on the screen, but he doesn't show that much. But at the end of the day, he's just like making a robot that pees like urine, and like, well, not literally, but you know, like he's doing something dumb like that, and that's like the title, and that's like how you hook them. And the other thing is too, on YouTube, they just is more, I would say, like developers that are watching right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed like, first I have to shout out Primogen because he spent $5 for me to tell you that your editor's weak. But
I have an editor, or is he talking about your editor?
he said tell Ben that your editor, or that his editor, is weak. So it might be your code
Oh
editor.
yeah,
It might
I'm
be
my
your video
own editor. That's
Uh,
why. I agree.
oh, I actually love that. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I've always, unfortunately, never been like a film person or video person. So my film director's weak, my editor's weak, everything is weak except for now and then I have some decent content ideas. And that's about it. I literally spend zero time. I like clip talking points, and that's about it. Sometimes I'll overlay some text, but yeah, I know it's absolute garbage. I mean, at some point I'll hire an editor, but I would have to be taking my content seriously, and I just like haven't been doing that for a hot minute. So that's why there's like I'm currently the editor. But yeah, I know I need an editor basically is the
Yep.
answer.
I mostly agree. Something I lecture a lot of like creators and other people in the space about. I feel like most people get an editor way, way, way too early in the career of their channel. Like they are all in on the idea of being a YouTuber, but like something you described earlier is like you learn the meta of TikTok by being on TikTok a bunch, by making TikToks, trying different things and seeing how they worked. I think that your success on TikTok is from that level of involvement. And when you pay an editor, you're detaching yourself meaningfully. And I think that that detachment keeps you from hitting like your potential cap. I am fascinated by how successful you were and also that you've been your editor this whole time. I think those are very strongly aligned things.
Yeah, I think that's also what I love about 15-second content is like editing those is even easier, slash you don't even need to edit a lot of the time. So like that's beautiful. I mean, obviously the new meta is like putting captions on your short form videos, which is why I'm sad. And I'm actually that's the one thing that's like that's so easy to hire an editor for. Like that one's
Yeah,
probably gonna happen first.
understandable. Yeah, I thought I was going to have to go all in on that, but then CapCut made it 2 button clicks, and now, or not, CapCut or Descript both are really good for that. So it's not too bad to add captions, but I'd say that's when I decided, oh yeah, I'll pull people on. I definitely need the help. And now that we're going for the daily uploads, even more so. But I go out of my way to watch all of the edits that the team's making, give a lot of feedback, and be like as involved as I can. And I think that we've like set a bar for the way the content should go and work. And I accept that like I will not make videos that are better than the videos I've made in the past, but we can set a new like bar. And as long as we always hit that bar, I think we can get some crazy amounts of content out. Apparently, Primogen meant your code editor, though. Please tell me you're not still on Atom.
Oh. You think I'm on Atom? You know I'm not on Atom.
Just making
Like,
sure.
I mean, are you still on Vim? Like, that's the question I have to ask you too.
I'm all the way
Like,
back on VS Code. I've hopped around enough, and Microsoft's IDE team knows what they're doing, and the results in editor that I'm relatively pleasantly happy with.
I haven't configured my editor in like 2 years. How many times have you configured yours? That's my only question for you.
He makes most of his content about configuring his editor.
Exactly. So
That's fine. It's like car people. Like who is a happier car owner? The guy who bought a Mustang from the 60s that he keeps replacing every part of, or the person who just bought like a new Tesla or Prius and has never opened their car before? Like it's two different things. There's no one is wrong, but like what's the goal of the car?
can I say? I'm just a Mercedes and Tesla. That's just who I am as a person.
Love it. Love it so much. The original reason I brought up Primogen, though, is I think there's been a renaissance in more senior YouTube content. Like it took a while for like senior like developers who care way too much about their egos to even move from like books are the source of truth to blog posts are the source of truth. And I think we're finally moving to like places like Twitter are a good way to learn about deep technical things. As silly as it is, like lots of good things happen on Twitter about the tech that we work with every day. And I think we're starting to see people recognize YouTube as a meaningful place for that as well. And I want to really like, I know Primogen's annoyed for me shouting about as often as I do for this. I think him and Jack Harrington in particular are two of the people who have really pushed that and have like made YouTube something that people take a little more seriously as not just a way for new devs to learn, but for careered and salaried devs to continue growing.
Right. I mean, I've said this for a while. I actually just think after like the very basics of programming is pretty like everyone likes to make those videos. But after that, it's like there's like no competition. There's like barely any tech YouTubers. And like tech YouTubers like literally drop out and stop making videos so often. Like I'm like out of the loop, barely posting anymore. Like everyone like will eventually drop out. There's not enough people coming in and more tech YouTubers drop out or not posting enough. And that's just how it is. So like here's why it's a problem. if I got like a fat salary at Google, like my incentive to go on weekends and post YouTube videos is very low. So I get that's like the scenario for a lot of tech workers is they just got fat salaries. Like why are they making YouTube videos?
Yep.
So I think that's like contributes to the problem. But there's tons of watchers. Like the eyeballs are there for like tech content on YouTube. So
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that what I've noticed the shift is there are more eyeballs, and those eyeballs are more and more senior. Both like the kids who grew up watching YouTube videos now have jobs themselves and are making lots of money and are used to going to YouTube and Twitch and these platforms to learn more because that's how they got there in the first place. So they've graduated the tutorial channels they grew up on, and they're looking for the next thing. And I think that like I know a bunch of people who are like framework authors. Like apparently Ryan Carniato, the creator of Solid.js, is also live, which sucks because I'm a good friend of his, and I hate like conflicting with his stream time. I know he's Wednesday every week, and I overbooked it because I'm stupid. But like the fact that I can plan around my stream with the author of one of my favorite frameworks, and he's the type of person who's also streaming now, is a huge shift in the dynamic of these platforms. Like there just was not this level of like very technical people like doing content.
It's great too. I mean, also like it's like a great way to get GitHub stars. So like it's like they doing the right thing. Like I support that 100%. Like it's like one of the best ways to get the word out about your like open source stuff. And also like people, there's like I'd say just a split of people that love actual watching a video versus like reading a video. And so you do just like miss out on like also like me being only a YouTube person, I've missed out on a lot of people that just like reading tuts too. So you do like hit different markets doing each one too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just pumped that this market is growing because for a long time, I think YouTube was seen as the thing for noobs. Like beginners go there to learn, but now it's a place where real technical discussions can happen. Like a silly example, but last year, I don't think any streamers or YouTubers were accepted to speak at NextConf. This year, like half the speakers are streamers and YouTubers. And that's such a huge shift in how like the creators of the tools that we work with every day are thinking of YouTube as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think it's good. And like I think also the next shift is going to be them making shorts and reels and whatnot too. I don't think it's going to happen for a bit because it's not there, but I mean that's like the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious there's a few people I've seen. Shout out to Ben Holmes on the Astro team. He's one of the first people I've seen doing vertical video, mostly on Twitter, that's focused on much more senior topics. Like he'll take one of my 1 hour plus long rants and turn that into like a 1 minute whiteboard video that he highly edits and shares. I think that's going to be one of those next metas where people are going to stuff like that for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean I love those. Like I'll sit through highly technical content on my phone for a minute. I know like the audience is not there yet, but there's like a few people, and I'm one of them at the very least.
Yeah, and if you can saturate those
I'm
people,
glad it worked on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. I still find Twitter is like my favorite platform, even if it doesn't bring me too much. I love the nature of it being like both async and very conversational, like just the funny moments and back and forths and like Twitter Spaces and all the content that I get and generate from like my community. I often joke like half of my content nowadays are things that I just stole straight from my Discord, and it's great. Like my community is making so much of my content for me.
Right. Yeah, no, I think Twitter's like one of the top, like if I had to name it, like I feel like online the like Twitter dev community is probably like the place to get the most information out of on like up to date what's going on, like maybe Reddit, maybe YouTube, but like Twitter's like the one where like you're gonna find everybody. Like the authors of all your open source libraries are at least on Twitter if they're not on YouTube yet.
Yep.
And like they're posting stuff about it.
Yep. And I've made some of my like closest friends through that too. Like huge shout out to Tanner Lindsley, the creator of React Query, for catching me like a 300 follower, not even account, asking about how I could make a code generator that makes type safe React Query calls to an API. And from there, he introduced me to Alex, the creator of TRPC, and here we are now as like a creator or whatever. But that all started just from me talking to people, building interesting things that I used every day on Twitter.
I had to poke Tanner so much to start using TypeScript. I'm glad he finally has embraced it.
I did not know you were one of the people who did that. Not only has he embraced it, he's one of the like people who pushes hard that's like, this sucked as a framework maintainer and a library builder, but it was so worth it. Everyone else needs to do it too.
Oh yeah. And like, I mean, yeah, that's one of those things like there's the learning curve, but then once you're past that, it's just like, how can you not have it anymore? So
Yeah, absolutely. It's also like something I've been pushing more and more is that there's a distinction between how TypeScript works and feels as a person building for non-technical users. Like when I'm building like when the output isn't code that is consumed by another developer, rather it's like a page or a JSON blob or things like that, that TypeScript's a much more pleasant experience than when you're building a library to be consumed. That particular process and that level of working within TypeScript is much more complex than the world a lot of us live in, just building applications for users, which is why we see maintainers like Ryan Carniato and like Tanner Lindsley hesitating to get into TypeScript because it's a lot more work and a lot less benefit at that point in like the stack.
Agreed. I mean, it's just tougher. Sucks to be a library developer. Glad I'm not one.
For real though. One of the coolest things that happened in this community is people were asking me to make a template of the T3 stack and the tech I use. And I refused, because if I make that template, people are going to add like a database and an auth plugin to their blogs. And I don't want people using the stack for blogs. So I haven't been clear about this. The T3 stack is not for blogs. Static content should use static frameworks that build high quality static sites. If you're building an application, this is one of the hardest to beat stacks for it. But I refuse to build a template for that reason. I said eventually maybe I or someone, if anyone wants to, could build a scaffolding CLI where you pick the parts you need and it adds those in. And a community member, Nexel, went and built it. And now it's sitting with over 7,500 stars on GitHub. It's been used to start countless projects. It's the better Create Next app with much more type safety baked in. The goal of it was to build you full stack type safety from database to user. And now you can do it in one CLI command.
Beautiful.
Yeah. On that topic, have you played with TRPC yet? I know I mentioned it to you before.
I have not played it yet. I've just like seen it pop more and more up on my Twitter feed. But no, I have not tried it yet. I haven't really done a new project in like the past few months to like give it a go. I'm still using good old GraphQL right now, but it is on my list of things to try for sure.
Yeah, I have been doing more GraphQL stuff, even though nobody's asking. Like the GraphQL topic has died so hard. I actually just had a long talk with the founder of EdgeDB yesterday where I was convincing him to drop GraphQL from their product. But I think GraphQL has been so misunderstood about like where it goes and how to use it. And to be clear, you're one of the people that uses it correct. You build a GraphQL schema and you fulfill it on one side and you consume it on the other. So I'll just ask, how do you feel about things like Hasura that generate a GraphQL schema on top of your database rather than giving you a backend to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I personally have always been a fan of more custom resolvers, which is why I have not really used that, because I've always, I mean, for the most part, the reason I don't like it is because most of the time you like the API they spit you out, you like need to make changes to it. So like most of the time I don't get that much value out of using something like that. So I have not really used it much, and not like, I'm not the pusher of it, you know?
Yep.
I'm a pusher of other things.
I'm an active detractor of it. I really like the way the TRPC creator put it, where auto-generated GraphQL makes the easy things slightly easier and the hard things nearly impossible. The beauty of GraphQL is like what you're using it for, where you're defining an API exactly as the clients need it and use it in a file that describes what that API is, the resolvers in the schema. Having a schema that you build to fulfill specific needs is the best part of GraphQL. Like GraphQL is a way to build an API as a schema. And if you're not building a schema, you're not using GraphQL.
I agree. And I would say the reason I even used GraphQL at the beginning is because I was attracted to the idea of type safe, like API calls. That's like that's like my favorite thing about GraphQL.
Yep.
And it just has it had the most tooling. Now that like there's a new library where I don't have to like, because like in my opinion, the downside of GraphQL is it also comes with a little bit of like complexity from the developer standpoint of just securing the API, for example, is a little bit more complex. So
or even
Obviously, if
consuming
you
it.
need to do rest.
There's like so many
Huh?
options, and it's really unclear nowadays,
Oh,
like how
that
to
too. That
generate
too.
the types, how to write the queries, how to generate the like type for that specific query, how to actually get all of that in your components. Are you going to use Relay? And if you do, are you going to honor Relay's expectations for ID consistency that Apollo doesn't honor at all? Like these types of things are a lot to chew on if you're not deep enough in GraphQL to make those decisions.
Yeah, I was supposed to try Relay a long time ago, but I was too lazy to try it. I have been using just Urkel client for a while now.
Oracle client,
It's like
interesting.
a lighter version of Apollo, yeah.
Yeah, Apollo's a lot. To this day, about a third of the CPU cycles on Twitch for like the JavaScript runtime are Apollo cache shit. It's just like dealing with the Apollo cache.
The normalized cache, yeah.
Yep. It's so much. Yeah. I did my first ever piece of dev content as a guest on the Apollo show or like podcast, mostly
Yeah.
and I specifically requested, normally it's like the guy who hosts the podcast, the content person, and whoever they want to talk to. But I convinced them to bring on one of the devs, Ben Newman, if I recall, who was just recently hired and was building all the new cache layer stuff to get him to add cache invalidation and deletions because they had not added it yet for Apollo 3.
That
And
took so long.
I am really proud of the bar I set for myself with that being one of the first things I did like to start my platform. It wasn't to make content to become famous and make money. It was to get this dependency we
What a
were
shame.
dying on fixed in using content as the medium to do such. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you were one of the people that brought invalidation to the forefront of the Apollo maintainers.
I got Apollo to start adding invalidation and deletions. You got Tanner to use TypeScript. We've made our contributions. I think we can retire now safe.
Let's go.
On that topic, I'd love to talk about the startup world and how that's all been going for you. I know a ton of people are curious what you've been up to. Want to give a TLDR of what you've been doing for the last year?
Yeah, so TLDR, I've been working on a game. It is a web-based game. If I had to describe it in 2 words, sometimes I tell people it's emo Pokemon. You know, you can go check it out if you like. It's called Void Pet. I never thought I'd be a game developer, but now I'm a game developer working on a company that's doing a game, and that's my life now. And that's also how I spend most of my time when I'm not making content.
Congrats again on that. As someone who started in games and found their way pretty much as far away as possible, I love that you went the other way and ended up there. What's life been like as a startup founder, especially compared to working other gigs and in particular YouTube?
So the funny thing is, it's like the same old, because I feel like I've been working on some kind of startup or project for like my entirety of like outside, like post college. I feel like post college, I was always working on some kind of company. It's always like the same thing. You're just like grinding away at one sprint for some particular thing you're trying to do. And I love it. I mean, I've always just been like the type of person that I actually like startups more than I think I liked content creation, but my content creation always did better than my startups. So it just has been one of those things where that's how it's been, and I'll still continue to do startups even if they're not as successful. So I mean I like the like grind, code, build something and see if people will use it. But it is not for everyone, that's for sure. And if I was a smarter person, I probably would just be a full-time content creator.
Interesting. Have you had a more traditional software dev gig at a FANG or something like that? Or have you always managed to sneak by with the content and startups?
So I worked at Bank of America during college as an intern, and that's the closest I've ever had to a real job. Because post college, I like basically decided, I was like, at first I was like, I'll like go to Google, and after I go to Google, I'll then start a startup. And I was like, why would I do 2 steps when I could just like skip the intermediate and directly start doing a company or startup? So after I graduated, I was like, yeah, I'll just skip that and just immediately start doing projects. I just like, that's just the thing I've always been interested in. So besides Make America, I've not like had like a full-time like software engineering job. I've done some freelancing stuff, but not full-time.
Very interesting. I feel like your experience and your stack both reflect much more traditional job time than usual. And I think that you managed to pull that off because of how many things you've worked on and played with, like especially the like full stack GraphQL with type safety. That's normally something that I see happen at like a big company after outage number 4 or 5, not something I would expect like an indie hacker to discover and go all in on. So yeah, I think that's super cool.
Yeah, I think it was two things. One, as far as you just learn very quickly that type safety is speed. And if you don't like, if you don't realize that yet, you haven't used it enough. So like, that's just like one thing. And secondly, I think I was doing so many tutorials. Like I said, I was doing like a daily tutorial content that my YouTube comments were teaching me as much as I was teaching my YouTube comments. And a lot of them work at big companies and work at, regular software engineering jobs, that I would like pick up the like tips. Like a lot of people get insulted or feel bad when like you make some kind of educational content and people nitpick in the comments and tell you, oh, you could have done it this way or that way or that way. Because it is kind of rough to hear that you're wrong. It's like, maybe I didn't mean to do it that way for XYZ reason. But personally, I've always like been very thankful of those comments, because they just like taught me so much when I like did not know a lot. So I would say like literally, if I didn't do the YouTube channel, I don't think I would be as good as a developer. But it's like the combination of building large scale projects combined with teaching large scale projects is like how I learned all my knowledge for sure.
That makes a ton of sense. I'm going to run a quick ad break. So people who aren't subscribed, you're not going to hear the next 2 minutes. I am
Get
sincerely
wrecked.
sorry. However, subscriptions are 25% off right now, and I will shout all of you out after the interview. So take this opportunity
I'm
to
gonna make this a
subscribe.
very juicy content piece.
Yeah. And those buttons super quick. Just need to kill the pre-rolls. The ads don't make me like any money, but if I don't run them, then people, when they click the video, don't see it immediately. They have to watch a minute of ads, and bounce rates are significantly higher. So sadly, I do have to force ads on them.
Analytics.
Yeah,
You know exactly why.
yeah, it's annoying, but I learned so much from it as I pay attention to these numbers. Anyways, I love your philosophy on the YouTube comment stuff. And I think this is something I picked up from skateboarding. It's like you get better at skateboarding when you hit the ground over and over again and just get used to hitting the ground and getting back up, and learn to kind of love it, because when you hit the ground, you can find a reason why and improve from there. And having that type of feedback and getting to be wrong all the time is honestly something I kind of miss now as a founder. It's like the hard lessons happen less often and much more painfully now. And I miss the days where I was like making 15 dumb code mistakes a day, and they'd get caught in code review. They'd get caught by linters. They'd get caught by like my coworker I'm working with saying, hey, why are you doing that way? That's dumb. And I could learn so much from that. I feel like I don't have as much of that in the space I am in now.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's something that annoys me a lot, because I got really spoiled with very fast iteration cycles on YouTube. I can post a YouTube video and I immediately know, except for like coding tutorials, they're a little bit different because they're search based. But like if I post a TikTok or YouTube, I know within a week whether it was a good video or not. Like you very quickly know, and you can like kind of iterate on it very quickly. Whereas, especially with games, it's very hard to have. There's like so many parts to them that it's hard to have a thing that you can test that as actually like enough of a MVP to like even like be a good experience if it's not missing X, Y, and Z things. And then you're like, all right, let's say it took me a month or 3 months. So that's like quick in gaming, right? It's still like 1 to 3 months of like, that's a much bigger iteration cycle than like, yeah, I'm posting a video each week and like I'll know each, and like that's so yeah, I feel you on the like slower iteration and feedbacks of startups compared to content spoils you.
Absolutely
I think it's coding.
agree. I always seek those short feedback loops. It's so valuable, and like the amount you can get out of that. Like one of the teams I was on at Twitch was building for the internal safety team. So like the people who review all of the reports and do the moderation for the platform at Twitch. And that job
Yeah.
sucks. You have no idea how much fucked up shit those people see and go through every day. It's absurd. And I was in a Slack channel with all of them. And when I made changes, I would get immediate feedback as to what was and wasn't working. And I realized if I put the extra time in, these people are spending 12 hours a day in the product that I'm building. They are so appreciative of every little detail. And I fell in love with that feedback loop where I had like my designer, my product manager, myself, and the team using the product all in one Slack. We could go back and forth, have meetings together, and make changes happen in hours instead of weeks. And I've constantly sought that out since.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And also, I did moderate my own dating app for a small bit, so I do have a few ideas what goes through these things.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
it's bad.
It's no bueno. Yeah.
It's a scary world that people will post and say the things they post and say. I've seen some shit. Yeah.
Indeed.
That all said, I think you're doing a lot of that at VoidPet, and I'm curious what you do to maintain it. Like, how do you stay closer with your users, and what are some of the things you're doing that don't scale? Not necessarily on a technical way, but like as a company, like what are the hacks you're doing to make that feedback loop tighter?
I mean, one of the beautiful things about VoidPet is there's a Discord of people that are always talking. So whenever I ever want to, I can go through the Discord channels or read the history of the Discord channels and like get instant feedback. If something got pushed, we like know right away and they will talk about it. So I'd say that's the main one. It's also like obviously not scalable because I'm going in and reading those things. But I would say like that's where I get most of my insights, because it's the same thing as going and reading YouTube comments or going and reading TikTok comments. So that's what I'm used to iterating on. So I'd say that's the thing that definitely gives me the most inspiration and ideas and like things to like work off, is just literally reading the like comments about the company that are just constantly influencing, which I'm lucky that we have a scenario where that's the case, because I know a lot of companies, it's either people don't know what Discord is or it's not viable to set that up, or the people that are using the product don't care enough about the like community of the product, or like the community is not a thing. So we're lucky enough to be in a situation where like, yeah, people want to trade things in the game or like and talk about it with other players, and that like naturally happened. So that's a big one, because I'm actually not a very big analytics person. I'm like small. I like a few analytics, but I do not primarily use analytics for a lot of decisions. I use sometimes, but
I don't think analytics are as valuable for smaller companies as people push. I'm trying to find the right way to put this. Like, investors love analytics because they don't have the context that you have on your company and that you have on your users. And analytics let them know something without having more context. But that's not your job. Your job is to absorb all of the context you can as a founder and be as involved with the users as possible. And the metrics are often going to distract you from that, from the things you're learning from your users as you work with them more directly. That said, a lot of investors love their metrics.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I feel like it also depends on the type of person you are and who you are. There's just like some people are just really more oriented of like putting the tracking everywhere and like setting up like more like hypothetical tests and like that very data oriented way of doing things. I just know that's not the case for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as I love hard numbers when they're there, but I'm not the one that is sprinkling them everywhere yet. Anyway,
I think that becomes much more useful when there are layers between the person who needs to see the information and the people who are the information's about. Like, you're right there with the users talking with them. You don't need a layer of numbers and a data person to do that translation. It's almost like that data person is the GraphQL. The users are the back end and you're the front end. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And what I'm suggesting is when you're small enough, you don't need GraphQL, which lines up with my usual stance.
T3 stack.
Yes,
there you
exactly.
go.
And the T3 stack is being as close as possible. I am curious, like something that I kind of made like the meme title for this video, or for this stream, something I think a lot about is the mindset differences between engineering, YouTubing, and founding. I find that they're all very different, but I find engineering is the most different, and that the YouTube grind and the founder grind have a lot more alignment.
Yeah, I'd say also, depending on where you start, I feel like you draw a lot of analogies usually. So like, for example, I draw a lot of analogies where like, oh yeah, this is just like how it is on YouTube in this degree. Like I'll like draw like these comparisons between Okay, I would post a YouTube video every week. What's the equivalent of how I can do that? Or like I literally said how I like read my Discord like I would read my YouTube or TikTok. Like I make lots of analogies like that. So I do very much like say I use a similar brain, or I like force myself to use a similar brain as with my content and um a startup. But also I'd say like content's just like basically a startup too. It's like a different type of product. Like BuzzFeed is literally a startup. You could say it's a startup too. So like there's like the lines blur, especially depending on what you're doing. Yeah, I'd agree that engineering is the most different for sure. And like, yeah, you're just like there's things that you can do. Like if you're persistent while coding, that's very helpful. And it's also very helpful for doing startups and content. But yeah, it's like there's like a lot of different things you have to be good at with engineering that I mean that's why I feel like a lot of very strong engineers are not inclined to make content and not inclined to even start companies because they are better at the like engineering spot and not even just better at it, you like prefer the skill set. Funny enough, I actually think I very enjoy the like engineering skill set of just like sitting down and coding a lot. um I think there's a world where I could have like dropped coding altogether and just been full-time content creator, but I realized it's not even what I liked. So I just didn't like I was terrible at making content at first until I spammed content for like a minute. If you go to my YouTube channel, it has like 1,000 videos on it. And so making that many videos is what got good, but I was not naturally, I'd say I was more naturally inclined to enjoy coding than I was content.
I totally agree and find myself in a weird place where like I do miss sitting and hacking on things, and most nights I'll still open my laptop in bed and like code for an hour or two. And like most of
Right.
the first version of Ping I built on my couch just after like a long day of work and meetings and stuff. And as much as I am like loving my life as a creator and a founder and doing all the other things I'm doing, I do miss coding every day. And on top of that, I've had to like go out of my way to take a step back and not take ownership of things that I'm realistically not going to do. Like when I hear a task, I'm like, oh, I could go code that out in an hour. But when am I going to find that hour, and whose toes am I going to be stepping on in the process? Like I have a CTO now. I have two other engineers. We have a team of people who work really hard to build the product. And I might have a longer history in engineering than them, but I'm not the one coding in it day to day. And taking that step back and accepting it has been weird. But at the same time, I realize like spending my time on YouTube rather than in the code base brings the company more value as the founder, because I'm the one bringing the mindset and the information necessary for us to succeed. And the things I think about every day as a creator are more aligned with what I need to be thinking about as a business lead. And when I think more about code, it helps the business grow way less.
That makes sense. Also, it don't make sense because it's also you're like kind of in the creator economy space, but also even outside the creator economy space, I'm sure you feel just like the general overlap of like content and startup things that
Yes,
are helpful for sure.
absolutely. There's a Harris Heller video that I really liked about YouTube. And like, I think it was called like, "Do you have what it takes to be a YouTuber?" or something silly like that. But the core message of the video was awesome. The concept he was really trying to push is that your success on YouTube isn't about how high your highs are. It isn't like at your peak, how great can your content be? You're going to be on the floor a lot. You're going to be at your worst point regularly. You're going to have months where every video is 10 out of 10 instead of 1 out of 10 on that ranking board. And how much does that fuck with you, and can you push through it? And how much does your content take the hit when those things happen? It's the exact same deal as running a business. Like the highs are going to be great, but the lows are going to suck. And even at a business that's doing pretty well like Ping, we have had some really, really low lows. And how you survive those and how you thrive in those lows is much more what defines your success as a creator and a CEO versus the engineering world. I would kill it for 2 weeks. Then I just like take 3 weeks where I barely show up to my meetings. I don't do jack shit and no one cares. You cannot do that in these worlds.
That makes sense. How many meetings would you say you do a week?
Let me check my calendar quick. This last week was pretty normal. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 meetings this week.
Dang. Okay, let me divide by
About
7. Okay, like
18 of
3 a
them
day.
were the first 2 days. I'm not trolling. There is no trolling here, guys. I would share my calendar, but
Dang.
there's like addresses and things in it.
I mean, I feel like that's pretty on point, to be honest. I mean, I was dividing it out more. It sounds like you just had some like meeting.
Don't.
Do you usually stack your meetings,
Yes.
or do you
Hard.
just okay? You do it on purpose. Then yeah.
Trust me, you want to stack your meetings. Otherwise, you will never get something done between 2 meetings, almost ever, no matter how focused and like talented you are. The best thing you're going to do in the half hour to hour between 2 meetings is add some items to your to-do list or reply to an email. Like, it's impossible. So like on Tuesday, I was literally in meetings from 10 a.m. till 9 p.m. this week. One of those was like a long dinner thing, but the rest were like back to back
Right.
to back to back to back meetings, because that's how I get like all of those done. And then I could still have days where like my Thursdays and Fridays tend to be empty by design. So if I have to book an emergency meeting, I can in those windows. But I have like on Friday, I have a block from 1 p.m. till 10 p.m. that's titled content block / work block with in parentheses can be booked over in emergencies. So people know like on my team, they can book over it, but people who can't see my calendar can't.
Yeah, no, I am a meeting stacker too, but my calendar's just like so much more lighter. I'm stacking like 2 meetings, and like that's like a my heavy meeting week. I like I'm very much a person right now, especially because I'm not managing a team where I'm like I try to wipe as many meetings off my calendar as possible.
Yeah, that's fair. There's a couple things that definitely make my calendar more full than average. In particular, I go really out of my way to sync with users whenever I have the opportunity. We have a book a demo button on Ping that's on the homepage, so you can book straight to my and my founding team's calendar, and I show up to most of those. And we have, when you do sign up, an onboarding cal that you can book to have us help you set up your OBS with Ping and figure out how all of this works. And I try to attend
Right.
as many of those types of things as possible. I'd say about a third to half of my meeting load is directly with users.
I mean, I guess that's probably like a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not complaining. When we first did the wait list for Ping and had like you couldn't start using, you could only book a demo, literally every single slot that we had in the Calendly for the first 2 weeks got taken, where it was meetings back to back to back, like 6 to 8 user meetings a day.
Oh boy.
It's incredible. I like the amount we learned in that window. Like we're still applying the stuff we learned. It's been like 8 months.
Yeah. The backlog.
It is what it is, but
Are you
yeah, I can't complain.
what do you guys use for your task board or like backlog? Are you I can't imagine you're a Jira user.
we're anti-Atlassian gang here. No Atlassian anything allowed. Code, products. Yeah. We're using Linear right now. It's been going pretty well. I will say I don't believe in backlogs. Backlogs aren't real. Like you throw a bunch of tickets into one, but those aren't going to, the only time anybody goes to the backlog is if they have nothing else to do. And if there's nothing else to do, you're no longer a startup. Congrats. But there are always other things to do. The strategy, I post this from Michael. I think he has a YC like YouTube video about it. But the strategy we're trying right now is every 2 weeks, we have a planning meeting where everybody lists random shit that we could do for the next 2 weeks. And if anything is pressing enough, it'll get brought up during that meeting. And then we prioritize this list based on how important it is to do those things ASAP. And then we draw a line on it. It's like everything above this line has to be done in these 2 weeks. Everything below it doesn't have to be. But if we finish the things above, we'll do those things. And then 2 weeks later, we do that again. So there's no backlog. Technically, we have those old planning meetings with the things that didn't make the cut. Sometimes people will look at those to refresh their memory, but ultimately, I trust the team to raise the things that matter for us.
That makes sense. And I'm sure there's some boys that get carried over each week.
Yes.
And once in a while, they get the spotlight.
Yeah, we had one like design overhaul ticket that got punted for like 3 months or so, and I had to keep like bugging Bryn about it. We finally got that one done, but like the device picker in Ping was rough for a while. Largely my fault, but like some things don't take high enough priority in this strategy, but those things end up sticking out more too. And I really think it's important, like for me at least, as like a leader who's kind of the scrum master now too, it's important for us to be as familiar with what's going on as possible and why people think things are important.
Yeah, I am a believer of the if I forgot about it, it probably wasn't important.
Yes.
There's like still a 5% chance it was important, but most of the time, if it wasn't brought to my attention again, it just was probably not important.
Yep. That's been
So
our
it's a good
experience.
test.
Yep. Yeah. People on YouTube think that we're trolling about this, but no, we're being very real. This is how we run things. I think it's important for us to prioritize based on what's currently going on. And also, like, things change every week or two as well. It's nuts how quickly things can change at a startup. Something I haven't asked yet, though, just like I'm curious, what's your team size looking like now? Do you have other engineers on the project yet?
So right now, it's just still me and my co-founder. So just 2-person team. And we are Notion for absolutely everything.
That's fine. I think Notion,
Yeah.
we've been using Notion exclusively for the content stuff. We only use Linear for once we do our meetings in Notion, we plan everything in Notion. And then at the end of the meeting, I go take the things we've decided on and throw all of those in Linear. We use Linear for like who's doing what when, Notion for all conversation, all planning, all discussion, everything else. My CTO hates me for it because I love Notion, but it's a great product.
Yeah, I'm actually on like your CTO side too, where I'm like so on Notion, but my co-founder absolutely loves Notion. I've like come to appreciate Notion more because it does like kind of have everything baked in, at least like 95% of what you need. So I'm slowly becoming a lover.
My main reason I like it more than almost anything I've used is it's Markdown and it works well on my phone. There's nothing else that hits both of those, as silly of a distinction as it is. I've never used a product that is Markdown focused and based where I can really export Markdown, and it has a really good mobile app for my phone, my iPad, and works on my computer well too.
That is true.
Yeah. Everything else is a nice bonus.
And GitHub needs to have an app. Actually, they did have an app.
GitHub app's really good.
But
I use it all. I do almost all my code reviews in the GitHub app. I'm self-owning really hard by admitting that, but yeah. I love the GitHub app. I use it so much.
I need to reinstall it. I installed it a while ago. There was something I couldn't do on it, so I uninstalled it because it kept defaulting things to the app. And then I never reinstalled it. That was my experience with the GitHub app. So now I have to retry it.
Primogen talking shit on the GitHub phone app. I have no reason to believe you own a phone. Primogen, you can't run Vim on your phone.
GitHub VS Code plugin is where it's at. I use GitHub 1S.
I like GitHub in the browser, as awful and buggy as it is. Like, it should not be on Rails anymore, and it's insulting how like inconsistent its state is. I refreshed the GitHub like repo for ping after not opening the page for like 3 or 4 days, and it had a stale cache asking me to make a PR for a branch that I hadn't touched in a week that the PR for merged 4 days ago. It was just like in the stale state still, because that's the state it was in the cache, and it didn't invalidate the cache properly.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, GitHub, you just gotta love it and hate it at the same time. It should have improvements in its UI, but it doesn't. But it's the platform, so you use it.
Yep. I do think that there is an opportunity to actually interrupt GitHub right now. Like I could see it being disrupted if someone cares enough and is committed enough, but I don't think anyone
GitLab
is.
wants to hear your location.
What's GitLab? Never heard of it.
Oof, insulting.
They're targeting other things, and that's fine. I appreciate what they're doing, especially focused on like enterprise, but that's not where my focus is. I care a lot more about like how many open source repos have you seen on GitLab recently?
0.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm curious if there's anything we didn't touch on. I know you said you didn't have as much time today, and I want to be respectful of that.
Oh yeah, I'm still like partially a sick boy, but I actually am feeling surprisingly better today. 2 days ago, I felt awful, and I was gonna see how I was feeling today, but I'm like doing pretty good so far. Should we do some questions from chat and
Absolutely.
see what chat has to say?
I've already seen somebody request Angular. I'll let you cover Angular. I'm tired of talking about it.
Look at that. You guys tired him out. Good work. Honestly, round of applause. You guys are doing God's work right now.
Yeah, I have a lot of energy, and managing to kill all of it for a topic is impressive.
What are your thoughts on WebSockets, Ben? I love WebSockets. I use WebSockets for Doge House for the entire thing. I figured I would have to use WebSockets for all the interactivity. So I was like, might as well load stuff with WebSockets too. I imagine Discord is probably a similar situation. I don't actually know what their internals look like. I didn't bother opening up the network tab, but I imagine it's probably similar in that case. But yeah, if you need real time, like WebSocket's great. Like you should use them.
When you use them, do you roll your own WebSocket provider and server, or do you like use another service?
Oh, look at you. So I actually did for the Elixir one. I had to roll my own on the like server side. And on the like front end side, I used like the browser WebSocket. So like I kind of rolled my own because I didn't use like Socket.io on the front end, but I used the like WebSocket primitive, but it's really not that primitive. You get like everything you kind of need. I mean, you have to like handle reconnects maybe. What's the only thing extra I had to do?
That's
But
cool
I
to
did
hear.
when I was doing Elixir. Yeah.
Yeah, I've recently especially relied more on third-party WebSocket providers, and I'm trying to figure out where my stance is going to end up because I do hate having to think about scaling for my WebSockets, and most of my use cases for WebSockets are live data. Like right now, whose mics are muted and unmuted, who's in the call, like whose bit rates are at what levels. All of that type of data isn't data I want to persist. So using something like Supabase and its data sync would not make sense for any of that. And I don't want to use traditional just like sending dumb messages because I need to know the state of the call when somebody joins late, like who has what devices active when I join the call. I can't just rely on the events. I need some level of state persistence for that. And there's a lot of providers that recognize this use case and have built products for it. I know Ably has a presence product. Pusher kind of does, but it can't be updated, so it's useless. LiveBlocks is a new startup that's entirely focused around this, which is really interesting. And I know PubNub has something similar too. And I specifically don't want to build presence distributed on top of WebSockets. And I don't want one of these database syncing things either. So I found myself just relying on these third parties and getting angry at them all the time, gaslighting me into thinking that I have an outage when they've had an outage for 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what it comes down to with like third party versus building your own. Is like when it goes wrong, what do you want to do? Or how often does it go wrong with a third party? I know actually I did build like a similar thing. I don't remember what I ended up doing for the like implementation because I remember there being two things. Whether I have my the server that passes the audio. What is that thing called? You know the name.
For WebRTC or WebSockets?
Yeah,
Oh,
WebRTC.
Yeah, the WebRTC turn and stun servers.
Yeah, those guys. So like I had the option of either having one of those guys tell me who's talking, or I could do the thing where like it's kind of hackable and you could just like on the front end, when they start talking and you like WebSocket it up and do the thing. I think I actually ended up not doing the turn server solution, and I started talking and my JavaScript detects you talked and like, but obviously there's like a slight,
yeah,
I think there might have been a little lag.
Yeah, WebRTC is a weird one too. I've personally, I'm just going to say their name more often because they've been cool to work with recently, but Agora has incredible infrastructure because they're not just using turn servers. They're hijacking all the packets at the turn server and then distributing across their edge network, which means you can pull down a subset of the feeds without having to be part of the whole network. So like right now you're sending up a 720p feed for like the main video feed as well as a mux down 360p feed. So if I'm just like calling in on a computer and I don't need the high quality, I can pull the low quality feed. But if I'm streaming it out on OBS, I have a different feed I can subscribe to there. And having infrastructure smart enough to distribute those different feeds and let me programmatically subscribe to specific ones is worth how god fucking awful their SDK is.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, the hard part with that stuff is the back end, so that makes sense.
Yep. And they did the hard part and they forgot to do the easy part, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah. So do you guys see yourself using Agora then as like just like that's like the future of like paying is like, are you guys gonna eventually switch?
Right now, Yes, but I can be convinced out of it by them. They just hired a new person who like is the like chief DX officer basically. Like it's their job to make it not miserable to use the product. We've met a whole bunch that've been awesome and like really care about the things we're describing. And there's a fan who might even be watching right now who works there that has been like giving me like inside info on all the APIs that like the SDK has that aren't documented anywhere that I need for like keyframe intervals and stuff like that. So that level of involvement is rebuilding my confidence. Oh, Akansha's here. Thank you, man. You have soul restored my faith in continuing to use Agora. We would have moved off months ago. So feel free to clip this and send it to your boss so you can get a well-deserved raise. You've been killing it. But like that's the level of involvement I need to justify using third-party dependencies now. Like if I have a problem on Vercel, I can hit up any of my friends who work there or tweet about it, and it gets resolved really quick. If I have a problem with Planet Scale, I can text Sam Lambert, and it's instantaneously handled. When I had problems with Ably, where their presence failed to sync across the globe, that they would tell me for months at a time, they don't have enough logs, they don't believe me. I rewrite the thing 4 times, I give them access to our log rocket, I do everything they ask. They're like, oh, we need more logs to see what you're doing wrong. And then I have a friend who works there join a call with me. He's in the UK, I'm in the US. He sees me, I don't see him on their dashboard. They were failing to sync presence across regions. Period. And I had a call with the CEO of this company from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. where for the first hour, he's trying to convince me this is my fault for not giving good enough logs. There's no way this bug is real. I show it to him. He joins it and sees it. He's like, oh, there's no way. This has to be something on your end. And then his CTO hits him up, says, by the way, we're fucked right now. Theo was right. Our infra is burning. And he kind of goes into apology mode for half an hour. A week later, I have a tweet thread where I'm talking about different WebSocket providers. And one of the sections, just one of the charts in the replies is reliability of providers. It's like, there's 4 things. It's like DX, reliability, distribution, and presence are like the 4 things. And I put Ably near the left on reliability. He sends me a fucking 4-pager in my DMs complaining about it. That's not like founder involvement at all. And I hate that's what should be one of our easiest dependencies is miserable to work with versus Agora, where I need to do something like keyframe intervals. There's no documentation in the docs on how to change the key intervals of a video track that Agora initialized. I hit up Akansh and he says, here's how you do it. We'll probably get this added to the doc soon. Those things are the make or break for me about using like third parties. And I look for that in particular now. It's rare that I will work with a company if I can't have a conversation with the founding team ahead of time.
That makes sense. You basically, if it's not your dev that you're going to shout out, you at least have the third party dev to shout out. That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm curious, like what dependencies have you been relying on? Like what are you building on top of at VoidPet?
That's a good question. I don't actually, off the top of my head, I don't think there's any third parties I can think of. Let me think about it for a second. For the most part, I try to like build it if I can, if it's not too bad, because I'm obviously not like trying to, but obviously I was like crazy enough to like do my own turn server stuff with like Doge House. And that obviously it was like a can of worms that like was a huge pain. Like S3 is like the main dependency I could think of that we use. So like, for example, I'm hosting my own database, and our own servers. Like, I mean, Docker obviously does not count. Docker Hub, I'll push up my Docker image to Docker Hub. That and S3, I think. Oh, you know what? No, that's a lie. That's a lie. Okay, so what I am using for the front end, so I'm using Next.js for the front end, right? And there's only one page on the entire website that needs server-side rendering, explicitly for just link previews. And for that, there's this library that I'm using that takes Next.js, uses Terraform to deploy it on AWS, and it sticks just that route on a Lambda, and it sticks everything else in S3. So that is the other AWS infrastructure. So I guess I'm just an AWS boy now that I realize it.
Yeah.
And as cloud, am I using Cloudflare? I might be using Cloudflare for something.
Interesting.
I can't remember if I'm caching any images. Most of our stuff is SVGs, so we're not actually caching images as much. So
DIY Vercel with a lot of S3. Very interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, Discord OAuth, but that's also not exactly, these are like half providers,
Absolutely. Yeah, this
Um,
is really interesting. I did not pin you for someone who would be all in on AWS. And I also totally agree. Like S3 is so prime for disruption. I bring this up all the time. I'm amazed nobody's like, just, you could build a better S3 on top of S3, charge twice as much, and like disrupt the whole industry.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. I mean, really, what it is like S3 does the job, and they love spamming you with credits. So it's like if you're gonna store a thing, like that's why I'm storing it there. I don't even know what. To be honest, I don't even know. Oh, you know what? I'm storing database backups on S3. That's what I'm storing.
Ah,
I was trying to think what exactly I was storing on S3. There might be some. Oh, I was storing also images that we use for link previews. So there's like two things I think that we're storing.
that makes
Um,
sense.
but
We, we're,
yeah.
we're storing a lot of video now. We're introducing call recording soon, and all that goes to S3. And
Oh boy.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot to deal with. It's a lot to deal with.
I mean, that's all of AWS products in
That's fair.
general are like annoying to use, but they get the job done and they're like usually good enough.
I'm just so impressed with how short your list of tech is. Like we keep a doc of all of the third-party providers that we're using for everything from like payroll to like taxes to obviously our tech stuff. And just the tech category's got like 20 providers in it.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do try to keep it low if I don't need it, but I will say I actually am the type of person that I usually need to be convinced to use the third party for the most part, unless it's just like an absolute nightmare to do on my own. Um, I am on the side of usually doing it myself, but there's of course always like the occasional thing that pops up.
Yeah.
Um,
I find so many things like that. Like, I don't know if I just run into those problems more often than average or if I'm more willing to call something one of those problems. But like, I'll never run an email server no matter how much you pay me. You'll never convince me to do it. I'm not rolling my own anything email on anything AWS.
okay,
Just
I agree with
fucking,
that one. I'm not
yeah.
doing that either. I
Yeah.
don't count that as, so we actually don't send any programmatic emails right now. So that's like a to be determined.
Mhm.
We used to use Twilio, funny enough, but we like got shreked with the bill, like on a wait list, like because mathematics and like what it actually costs were like different, and like what you guesstimate the price would be versus like when it actually happens
Yeah.
is different. And we didn't expect as many users to like sign up for the like text wait list, and they did, and it was like sad panda bear, so that got ripped out. So like Twilio used to be a thing we used, and that's gone. Now you just sign up with it.
That makes a lot of sense. That said, I don't want to ever touch texting through anything other than Twilio. The thought is scary, but texts are expensive. I love how simple it is to do. Like part of T3 Stack is Nextauth, and it's just an npm package you install that handles all the routing for you, all the callbacks for you. You list the providers you want and the configuration for those, like the keys and the secrets for Twitch, Twitter, Discord, whatever. And you can very,
That's
very
fair.
quickly build like authentication into your app without giving up ownership of that by like passing it to Firebase or passing it to Supabase or Auth0 or one of these other services. It's still built on top of your database using Prisma. Even if you want, you can adapt Nextauth directly to your Prisma database and have all of your user status synced that way. It's super convenient. You get all the benefits of using one of these third-party providers without giving up the ownership that you normally lose from those.
Fun fact, I am currently using Prisma for only migrations because they had a problem with too many SQL queries being generated that I ripped it out and like basically wrote my own version of it that's like pretty simple for CRUD operations, and now all it does is keep track of my schema.
Fascinating. I love Prisma for the schema. I'm anti-migration at this point in my life, but that's its own long rabbit hole take that I don't want to go too deep on.
Oh
But
boy.
like we have our
He's not
history.
doing migration.
Yeah, if we have a schema and the schema changes, that's our history. That's how the database changed, is whatever the git diffs are on the schema. And if you're doing custom things in the migration, like you're renaming tables or you're moving things from one place to another, that migration is no longer safe. You are now, like by definition, running a change that in production will cause some clients to be out of date. So if you want to rename a field or migrate a field, the safe way to do it is to have a commit and have a deploy where you add the new field. Then once that new field has been added as an optional, you move the data over, and then you do another request where you deprecate the old field and make the new one mandatory. And then you do that. But like the migration should be the history of my Git commits. And when you get to that point and you use something like Planet Scale as a layer for your deployment of a schema change, life gets so much easier. And I'm so happy to be migration free. I had no idea how much those things stressed me out until I lived without them.
Yeah, I could get behind that. I am definitely the person who just breaks it for those 5 clients in prod right now. If I like delete a table or I mean, I'm not deleting tables in prod, but if I'm dropping a column, usually it would be like, obviously it's very rare usually that you drop a column. Like I'd say like maybe I've dropped 1 column or so. I will say like in general, now that I think about it, I will probably just like leave the old data there if I'm renaming it. But there is some times where I've casted some stuff and whatnot, and I'm sure it did break for a few people. So that does make sense. And I'm guilty of breaking things.
We actually we did use it once so far, but one of my favorite changes or Planet Scale made recently, because they're built on top of Vitesse, is you can write to 2 parallel DBs at the same time. So whenever you make a change, it maintains the old database schema in a fork of your database for 30 minutes and writes all new changes to both. So you can roll back your deployment in the thing you dropped, but still have the any data that came in the interim.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's super OP.
That is... the first thing I thought about is it'd be so funny if one SQL command errors out and the other one doesn't. But that in general feels like it's going to be like a very nice feature.
Yeah, it's saved our lives already multiple times. Not multiple times. We had one really big one where like we made a change and made a field mandatory that shouldn't have been, and it like broke loading for pages. We clicked undo. Everything was fine, just instantaneously.
Oh, that's great.
I'm really big on building safety nets rather than guardrails, where like guardrails are things like strict unit testing rules and like long deployment docs on how you deploy every Wednesday at this time, and all changes need to be staged by Monday. Like, to me, those are all guardrails, and I'm much more interested in building safety nets for like when a deploy goes out and it's bad. How long does it take to recover, and what does that recovery look like? How can I make it as easy for people to screw up and recover? Because that's when they're going to learn more. That's when we're going to grow more. That's when like real change is going to happen.
And that's why I test in prod, guys. Let's go.
As long as you have a close enough relationship with your users, testing in prod is hard to beat. Like there is no other, because we're always testing in prod, because if we're not, we are lying to ourselves in our environment. We can have a dev environment and a staging environment where we can realistically test most things, but production is a different environment. Things will break there. You can make it less likely, but you can't make it impossible. So by investing in the recovery first and foremost, you're not denying reality, you're living it.
Thank you. I'm going to snippet this and send this to anyone who asks me why I don't write enough tests.
I have a lot of videos you could send them. It's one of my favorite topics.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think I think types have covered so much of what unit tests used to be important for.
Oh, agreed. But I didn't write unit tests in JavaScript either, so I'm guilty in both cases. So
I'm bouncing back from over testing. I've chosen to be the antithesis of the everything should always be tested person, even though there are places where unit tests make a lot of sense, especially like if you had an outage that a test could have caught and you can write that test quickly, go write that test after. Absolutely. If you can prevent a future outage that has happened with a test, do it. But of the dozens of outages we've had at Ping, I've kept track. We've had 3-ish that a unit test may have caught.
That actually seems like a pretty good stat, though.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. I'm really happy with where we're at. Like 3 things that like if we were like in 1 year, 3 outages where if we were super strong on unit tests, those might have not happened when we were able to recover from all 3 in seconds. Yeah. Somebody asked if I wrote unit tests in Twitch. There was a strict 80% code coverage on the website that they bumped up to 90 at a point, and it was rough. One of my favorite moments, I'm pretty sure this code still exists. There was like an old feature that we wrote a better like version of, and the old one was like 10,000 plus lines of chaotic code. We replaced it with like a 400 line of code, like 2 components, really nice, elegant thing. to this day, I don't think they've deleted the old one because the old one had really strong code coverage in that giant pile of shit code. And whenever they delete it, the code base is now below the threshold. So PRs to remove a deprecated feature cannot merge because deleting code causes the threshold to go down.
I would totally do that. I would literally write code just to bump up the code coverage. That's beautiful.
Yep, it's horrifying, but that's also the reality that code coverage rules enforce. If tests are solving a specific problem you have, awesome, go for it. If you're adding tests, or if the problem is a number you're trying to hit, fuck off.
Amen.
I saw a couple more questions. There was one that was interesting to me. I'm curious, and obviously if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. Somebody asked like what your current sources of income are and how that breaks down.
Basically just YouTube and what's it called? Void pet subscriptions / microtransactions. Yeah, those are my main two. I used to do some freelancing, but I pretty much stopped that when I was kind of full-timing startups. And then, yeah, I used to have a Patreon, but I don't think that exists anymore.
You don't think it exists anymore. There might just be a bunch of money sitting there, but you don't know.
I haven't touched. Oh, there's actually a really funny thing. Brave was the thing I opened like maybe a couple months ago and realized there's a bunch of money in that because crypto enjoyers will watch your videos in Brave and will donate like bits of Brave apparently using the browser. And so I didn't realize I had like a cache of Brave that I'm
not bad.
And I'm hoping goes back up because it's worth nothing right now. But, technically it's a large number of Brave bits. I forget what it's called, bats or something.
I found a bunch of Dogecoin in an old folder from college a few months ago, or years ago now. It was at the I think it was beginning of 2020 or so. I just found this old pile of Dogecoin. It's like, oh shit, I have a bunch of Doge here. It's like, I think I had 100,000 coins or so. And it was at like a cent. And I was so blown away, like, oh my God, there's like $1,000 here. Sold it immediately. And then like a month later, it was at 50 cents. So I was like, what the, God fucking damn it.
Hate to see it.
Somebody wants me to ask you about pre-commit hooks because we've been talking about those more recently.
Gross.
Okay. That's all we needed to hear. Next question. We're aligned. Somebody asked about investors at VoidPet. What's the investor and fundraising grind been like so far?
It is currently on a top secret label, and there will possibly be updates in the near future on it.
Oh boy. DM me after this. I would love to hear more.
Okay. Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way. I know that some of the chats that I've heard people I've interviewed went pretty well. So good to hear that progress has been consistent. Yeah. What are your plans when funds hit? Are you going to start growing the team? Are you going to do marketing? Like, what are you excited for?
I don't know what part I'm excited for, but we would definitely like hire a team for sure. I think the hiring part, I don't know whether my life will get better or worse when that person exists. So we'll see. I'm a person that has zero expectations until it happens, and I don't think too. I'm an in the moment person. Like we'll get there when it's there. Until then, I'm in the now.
I really appreciate that, and I feel like a lot of founders are optimizing for like the mindset of like focusing on what's right now. I see a lot of founders that are so focused on where they think things are going to be next year on the trajectory of right now, where they're like constantly like they're introducing Kubernetes to their 2-person company and like building these crazy complex infrastructures. I've talked to startups that have more servers than they have users. And it's just like, what are you doing? And I almost feel like that's the default. Like the more founders I talk to, the more I find who are really focused on where they think they are going rather than where they are right now. And I feel like at the very least, like every time we have like a big moment, moving to the next step is a lot easier if we haven't over prepared for it. Because if our plans do not line up with what happens and we put all this effort into a plan that isn't happening, things get a lot harder. And like hiring up, building tech with things like Kubernetes, all this stuff is building like really strong walls and anchors in directions you might not be interested in.
Yeah, I've always been lucky because while I appreciate good code and I can sometimes say that good code, that bad code, I've always been like the hacker type that is just running all kinds of spaghetti code that like it works now. And I'm very much on the side of I am maybe writing a bit more spaghetti code than I could be a little bit more software engineering, good standard, good practices, but I usually lean on the ship it end of the spectrum.
That makes sense. I did just notice on YouTube that we have 200 likes and 400 viewers, and that ratio feels a little off. So if y'all could hammer the like button really quick, likes are free and they help us out a lot. You ungrateful bastards. Appreciate it.
Called
Love y'all.
out.
Anyways, there are some good questions on YouTube, and once I see that like number jump up, I will start asking them. But until then, YouTube chat's being ignored. Just
Wow,
kidding.
you guys just got blackmailed. How's
Yeah.
that feel?
I am going to run ads really quick though because we have pre-rolls on again. So
Wow, look at that. And you're getting ads. Well, YouTube
yep,
doesn't get ads. Twitch is getting punished.
yep, and YouTube too. Don't worry, I'll make sure they get the ads as well.
Oh, thank
Cool.
goodness.
With ads running, there was a sub question that we could ask. Matt, who is also Tennessean, was curious if you are still in Tennessee and what your thoughts are on like living in the Bay versus everything else as a startup founder.
No, I actually just left. I did not like Tennessee. Well, I like Tennessee, but I didn't like it at the same time. I'm living in Austin, Texas
Oh
again.
shit.
I basically um, grew up in Austin, decided Austin was bad. So then I traveled a bunch of different places, but I didn't know what was good. So I traveled a whole bunch of different places. I went to SF, I went to LA, I went to Arizona, I went to New York. Like I went to most of the hubs. The only hub I didn't hit was Miami, I'd say, at least of recently of what you could call tech
Mhm.
hubs. Oh, I didn't do Seattle either, but I don't like rain. So that was just like off the, and I only like warm weather too. So like I had a few things at least to narrow down my decisions, but then I was like, oh crap, turns out I actually just like took for granted a lot of the things that I grew up with and didn't realize were like kind of good, and I actually just like Texas. So I'm back in Texas. um i I like the idea of being around a lot of founders and doing um I love talking to founders and like just talking about what they're doing and like, you know, doing the battle, blah, 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 blah. But like, since I was like kind of on the creator side first, I mean, this is really funny because you'd like think I'd be like into LA or whatever. I actually almost considered going to LA, but that's a whole other story. Um, I didn't like, I basically knew no founders growing up. So I was never in a situation where I was talking to founders or as like around tech bros or anything until maybe like before, basically after my TikTok blew up, then I had more opportunities to travel and like talk to more quote unquote tech bros. But before that, I like literally barely knew any founders, I'd say, because I was just outside that bubble. So I would say one is very helpful to be like surrounded by people that are doing the things that you want to do. So I really like that. I wish that I could like live in SF, but I just don't like it as much.
Yeah.
Um, like, I like the aspect of it being like the tech stuff, but I dislike the like city stuff. And the reason I settled on Austin because it was a nice medium where I like the city, and the tech bubble is like a crap ton smaller, but at least there like is a little bit of something. Where in Tennessee there was like nothing. Like it was just like absolutely dead. Now to be fair, I was like a little bit outside of Nashville, so like even Nashville is gonna be better. But I was like, no, let's just go to Austin. And
Yeah.
yeah, so my opinion is I think it helps to be around founders and tech, but for me, I just like don't like SF the city.
It's like there's a lot of cost to being here, both financial and like spiritual, but
Right.
the benefits, if you benefit from them, are huge. Like when the skate culture hadn't died yet, which COVID totally wrecked the skate culture in the city, but before then, as a skater, there was no better place to be. As a tech bro, there was nowhere better to be, and as a founder, there was no better place to be. So I dealt with all of the chaos of being here, the expense, and everything else that makes SF. Now that I've like done my fundraising, had my founder conversations, built my circle of people I trust to talk to and such, I feel less and less a reason to be here. But for building that initial group, like meeting with Y Combinator founders every week during the batch, for going to like events that were in the city about Y Combinator stuff and talking to other founders and just being deep in all of that, it is really nice. And I'll say, like, both in the like having people to sympathize with and like who understand the weird problems we run into as founders, and on the other side having peers to compare yourself against and see like if the problems you're running into are normal or not. Like, one of the things that I think we've both seen with YouTube is there's a lot of talented devs that don't know any other developers and don't have any developer friends, and they're gauging themselves and learning themselves on platforms like what we have in the communities that we've built. It's even rarer to know founders, and it's so important to have people you talk to and can trust and, to be frank, compare yourself against to know how you're doing.
Right. And I do think post-COVID, things are a lot more online, which helps. So I think like that's like a big plus. And like, at least for me, a lot of like gates opened up because I was doing content. But if you're someone who's not doing content, I think it's just a lot harder to like get into the founder bubbles. And I would even say, even though I was doing content and like I was able to meet people through the content, I'd say like probably one of my bigger weaknesses as a founder is just like not ever being in the like SF world and like knowing those people. But that's like a whole other can of worms.
Totally. Yeah, it's a lot. And like breaking into those circles is hard. But like if you end up in Y Combinator doing something like that, move out here for the batch. Like, be as involved as you can during that time. Like, I got so much being here around then and the people I met and got to network with during then. But since then, it's like I have an in-person meeting like with an SF founder or somebody who's not SF but is visiting every 2 weeks to month or so. And those are great and really cool and all, but not anywhere near as essential as the first few months, especially when I was fundraising.
Right. That was another thing where I was trying to decide where I wanted to live. A big factor was there's like a few cities that everyone will find themselves in probably once a year at the very least. And like SF in New York happen, and like LA are like three cities that are like very much in like, at some point this year, one of your founder friends will be in one of those cities. Like, it's almost guaranteed.
Yep.
And like, you can hang out with them. You're able to like do a thing, or they're like flying literally for the event that you're going to be doing or whatever. So,
but now you have to find a way to make founder friends in the first place. We have that through like our content, our networks, our platforms.
Right.
But for those who don't, it's so helpful to be able to meet these people. And like something I've found quickly, like just the difference in like me having a Twitter account that I can talk to other devs and founders with, and a lot of other people in my batch not having that, like how much they rely on the like YC benefited us in so many ways, but I could have gotten a handful of those benefits through my network in other ways. And I see like a huge part of the value they bring is similar to the value that like a boot camp brings. Is not that like a boot camp is the way to learn to program the same way YC isn't the way to run a startup, but it significantly increases your chances by surrounding you with other people doing the same thing with people in front of you who have succeeded at doing that thing. And I find that relationship is the biggest value of these programs.
Right. Like, a lot of people think the value of a boot camp is because they teach you how to code. It's more of like being surrounded by like-minded people that are also learning to code around you. And like, that's like, in my opinion, the value add as well.
Yeah. So 2 more really good questions I want to jump on. One's much more content. One's much more tech. I want to start with the content one, though. It's from a tier 3 sub who I love, who's recently getting into content himself, Dev. His question was about how we actually make our content, in particular, how much is pre-written versus how much is improv.
So at the very beginning of my content creation career, 0 was written. And at the end of my content career life, I was more on the written side. I would say I'm always somebody that has some amount of improv because I will get inspired when saying something. But I think the right answer for a person is you should try both and see what works better.
That's very fair. I found like a hybrid approach that works well for me. I think that one of the best signals, obviously start with improv because that's the least work and you'll be the most productive. But if you find that the content you're editing and the videos you're putting out are not as high of quality, obviously adjust at that point and do more pre-writing, do more planning. What I found worked for me was I was doing my streams. I had an editor. My editor had to drop because he got a job at being funny enough. So I started editing my own videos. I learned that my streams sucked to edit because my topics weren't consistent. I was hopping all over the place and just wasn't a pleasant way to turn a stream into content. So I started a Notion doc where I would list topic ideas ahead of time, and I would try to like pick specific topics to cover in a stream and start and finish those topics to make it easier to edit. This resulted in both the streams being better because you could follow along more, the topics were more cohesive, just higher quality like content there, and also the quality of the videos I was able to edit went up significantly too. But I adjusted based on the problems I was running into creating content rather than pre-planning too much ahead. And generally, this is the same way I am with tech. Start with the simplest possible thing and work up from there based on what problems you run into.
I will upvote that answer.
Good shit. And surprise, surprise, we're very aligned. Somebody mentioned that previously you were not very big on serverless and is curious how your stance has changed since, if it has.
There's a few situations where I do like serverless. For the most part, I just hate that there's a freaking, I mean, okay, so there's like varying degrees of what's considered serverless and what's good and what's bad. Like I obviously, the thing that's to dislike about serverless is the cold start, like, or the lag, like that's the only thing to dislike about serverless. Or like if you want to call it like the overhead of like trying to like the DX of it. But like obviously the main pain point is the cold start and like, or the pricing. Like otherwise
also the
everyone would
lack
always use it,
of state and the fact that now developers have to be considerate of what goes where, because serverless is just a pipe. It's a thing that runs your code. It doesn't store anything, doesn't hold data. And like in the Create T3 app, we've had a bunch of people running into issues because we default to SQLite so you can init and have something there. But if you deploy on serverless with SQLite, it's going to work once.
Yeah, I haven't done serverless with database in so long. I forget that that's like a major headache is the connections, and that's just like that's just another can of worms. So I don't like it as a main like server, as like taking most like web server tasks and that sort of things. With that said, I like it for unique like use cases. I'll give you a few. So one of them, I don't know if any of you remember the dating app that I made, where you would upload pictures of your code, and it would, you know, you need to upload pictures basically. And I had to do some transformations on it or something. There was something to be, or no, I had to check and make sure you guys weren't uploading porn. That's what it was. So I had to run some like calls and whatnot, and I didn't want my server to get wrecked. So I just like I was like, I want to infinitely scale my image uploads. So that's why I used S3 and Lambdas and then put an S3. And I literally didn't care if your image took like 5 seconds to upload. It is what it is. And I just like did JWTs for authentication. It was fine. That worked great. I was happy with that situation. Another situation I like it in is server-side rendering, because now I can scale out the like number of people that visit my website. And if 100 people visit my website at once, which, you know, does not happen, but there's bursts of people that'll sometimes come and it's annoying and whatnot, especially with Next.js. You're like, why is my server? I used to not serverless with Next.js, and it would just randomly be really slow, and it was dumb. It was because it was getting burst and got wrecked. So like that's also where I like serverless. So in those two circumstances, I enjoyed the life of serverless.
Interesting. I didn't think we'd find something to disagree on, and I'm pumped we did, because I am all in on serverless, in particular Edge, now that that's become a reasonable option. I am curious, has the proliferation of Edge and the ability to run things like Astro or Next.js on the Edge changed your stance here at all?
So I love Edge if I can slap Edge in the thing. But here's the thing with Edge. I mean, if I don't have to hit the database, then Edge is beautiful, like fantastic. But if it doesn't have to hit the database, like sometimes it should be a CDN. Obviously, there's some other circumstances that are kind of in the middle, but like the Edge is negated if at least a good part is if it has to hit the database. I would still slap my like Next.js result server-side rendering in Edge, because like why not? Because at least like the beginning like latency is like a little bit better. But
I hear you. I'm gonna share a link in chat.
Give me a diagram. You look like you're about to give me a diagram.
I am tempted, but I don't feel like going quite that far. So I'm just gonna share a link in chat for something I built. I recently made it slower because I'm blocking on a DB write every time you open the page I just linked in Twitch chat. that page is rendered on Vercel's Edge, which is using Cloudflare workers, and it is hitting planet scale via their HTTP endpoints. And I'm able to consistently load it under 300 milliseconds in San Francisco. For like from page request, a DB read and write occurs, a new page is generated and sent to the user, all under 300 milliseconds, which is absolutely fucking absurd.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So wait, I'd be curious what the like time diff would be for like this with Lambda.
Oh, on Lambda, it would be add another 150 milliseconds or so.
Okay, is it only cold start or is it
warm start will be fine.
Okay.
But yeah,
so it is just bad. The cold. So it's not the fact that it's at the edge, it's the fact that they're using
it's the warmer starts,
like ISO thingamabobber that goes faster.
Yes. When there isn't data involved and the render on the edge is doing everything it needs at that edge and it doesn't have to do a further network request, absolutely it's going to be faster to like run on the edge just by being closer to the user. But when it comes to cold starts, that's where I think like Edge beats out Lambda, even if you're doing a round trip to a database. Like, yes, there's a bounce. Like, I have to go to this edge that then goes to West 2. But if it's going to West 2 and can get there faster, get back faster, and this whole process kicks off sooner, we're in a really good spot. But I think like the really cool magic here, and I'm seeing more and more providers introducing this, is that I'm hitting my SQL database via HTTP, not like a SQL connection. So I don't have to have a native layer binding a connection to the database directly. I'm not hitting a connection pooling limit or anything like that because I'm not connecting to the database. I'm sending serialized SQL via HTTP to the server that then responds with the JSON blob result that I can do whatever I want with. I attached Keysly to it, which is like a Prisma-like query builder that's type safe. And now I have DIY Prisma that's edge ready with 300 milliseconds or less of load in like the region that my database is around.
Do you know if Lambda Edge does the
Lambda
whole
Edge is a joke.
thing that it is?
Yeah.
Gosh dang it. I'm using Lambda Edge. What a shame.
Sorry. Have you given Vercel in particular, like Vercel serverless functions, an honest shot?
Oh, so actually I would love to use Vercel. The only reason I didn't use Vercel is I thought their pricing was a joke, that you just like hit the bandwidth like that. And I was like, well, I didn't want to get started on it and then have to switch like relatively quickly. I'd have to look at what my bandwidth number was now to even see if I would pass the bandwidth, because I don't remember what it was. And I'm not image heavy, so maybe it would be okay. But that was my only Vercel concern. Like I was waiting there. I basically did this research a bit ago and I could not get Next.js working in Cloudflare workers. So I was sad, but that's my ideal setup, is basically Cloudflare workers or like the equivalent.
Yeah, Next is starting to get like worker ready. They most recent 2 Next updates, they added an optional like run in edge workers thing you can call out in the config, and then Vercel will deploy those specific functions and endpoints to edge. The SSR part still is pretty inconsistent and slow if you edge render for it, and it breaks like with random packages in ways that aren't particularly easy to debug still. But for the backend stuff, it's pretty nice. I personally use Astro when I'm doing these tests because they're much more like edge first and minimal. It's not that I think Edge is or Astro is better than Next, especially not for apps, but it lets me very quickly write and deploy a function that runs on Vercel's Edge. And I could see myself using Astro as like a way, or almost like a fastify Edge deployment through this strategy.
Right. Yeah, no. If I could use Edge easily with Next, I would be using Edge with Next. It just so happens the situation that was the easiest and not the most expensive was whatever the crap I'm doing now. Did Vercel change their infrastructure? Because I know at one point they were Lambdas. Are they not Lambdas anymore?
It's still Lambda for the serverless functions, and that's still the default. There's a new opt-in Edge runtime that you can use. And the Edge runtime is a lot more like, I don't say more powerful because that's the wrong word. Because obviously, if you like in a Lambda, you can run anything. In Vercel, if you have a GitHub repo that has a folder named API with a Go file in it, a Python file in it, and a TypeScript file in it, it will deploy all 3 of those as Lambdas just by binding it to Vercel. It's incredible what they do there. But with Edge, Edge runtimes are much more peculiar, and you need a framework that understands them. And I think the work they're doing there is what's most impressive by building the like Vercel build I forget what they call it. It's like the build SDK or something for framework developers to make it easy to deploy their frameworks on the edge via Vercel.
Sweet.
And as for the
So
pricing,
it's coming.
one of my favorite things about the new Vercel middleware stuff is since it runs on the edge and the edge is way cheaper, they charge. What do you think they charge for 1 million invocations?
Oh, that's a good question. Gosh, I don't even remember what Lambda used to be. I'm gonna guess $1.
65 cents for 1 million
All right,
invocations.
I was rounded up. Let's go.
Not bad at all. Yeah, pretty close guess.
No,
For
that's not
reference, a 100 gigabyte hours of serverless function processing is $40. So it's pretty absurd how cheap the middleware functions are.
I feel like, was that the same thing as Cloudflare pricing? Okay, Cloudflare's 15 cents.
Yeah.
So it's like
it's running on Cloudflare's edge, to be clear. Like they're reselling Cloudflare's edge with a better
okay.
Like Vercel's edge is Cloudflare. Vercel's serverless functions are Lambda. Vercel is just an easier like SDK and like deployment method for both.
That makes sense. No, yeah, I want that scenario where I can SSR on the edge, and I know we're not there yet, but that's the world I want.
Yeah, we're like this close, and I'm hopeful that at the next conference we're gonna see that as the big new thing. I'm also curious if you played specifically with, I think this would be useful for some of the stuff you were describing, ISR and increment, or specifically programmatic invalidation in the new Next.js updates.
I have not, mainly because I haven't had anything yet that's like that amount of like in between. Like I've either had pretty much static or pretty much dynamic, that it should be one of those things. So I have not tried it yet.
Interesting. I find that I am in the middle more than I'm on the very dynamic extreme. At the very least, like if it's very dynamic, I usually don't care about the contents of the HTML down the wire. I'm cool with the HTML being wrong and or just having a loading state, and then the client gets the most up-to-date data. But I find I have a lot of stuff in that middle area. Like when I share a room link on Ping and that invite has like my picture and my name for the room and stuff like that, and then I go rename my room. What's cool with the like programmatic revalidation is I can have in the like mutation endpoint that updates the name, it can revalidate all of the URLs that have that in the HTML then. So the next time somebody fetches, they're hitting a CDN cached HTML file that was created when I made the change programmatically, rather than being created on request or post request, which lets you always have the most up-to-date data without ever running serverless functions to get it, only running those functions to update it when changes happen.
Okay, maybe I should just try it then. I always thought I was like never in the scenario where I should be using it. But basically, the only thing I've actually only ever cared about with SSR was like Google SEO and link previews. And basically the link preview scenario we have is we want to show your pet that you have on your profile, and you can update that pet like whenever you want and like possibly multiple times a day. But like if it's going to be like sub 10 or whatever updates on a particular user, but like of course that's spanned across all users. But it sounds like I just called the validation function X amount of times.
Yeah, if you ISR for the first request and then revalidate on changes, you will have sometimes the first load will be the cold start time, but anytime somebody updates anything, a cache entity will be created in the CDN, and you don't have to have any build runtime to block either. So you'd get on a new deployment, the first load can take up to 2 seconds. But if after any user updates anything or sends the link somewhere, it will always be milliseconds from that point forward because it lives in the cache from there on.
Right.
And it's always the most up-to-date entity in the cache. And I think that's what's cool about like the ISR and specifically the programmatic revalidate is you usually have a cache and the cache is always true. Where most of the time with cache strategies, it's you always have the cache and the cache is sometimes true. I like this slight direction shift for caching.
That makes sense. I probably should give that a try, to be honest. I'm actually just curious what my bandwidth is right now.
I am also very curious too.
Take a guess. What do you think my bandwidth is?
Like how many? No idea. How many like gigs you're sending a month on VoidPet?
Yeah, I have no. I can't even give you like anything to guess off of either.
Is this
do you know how much bandwidth you use at Ping?
I can check.
Oh, I imagine you guys use a crap load. I mean,
no, our video
besides
stuff's going through different providers. So the
yeah.
what you're fetching through Vercel is the thing I can check. So that's going to be like the HTML and JSON for requests and things like that. Let's see, usage.
Dude, I got a fat website that is not. It has so much JavaScript. All right, let me see my logs.
There was one day where there must have been a bug. Oh, I remember this day actually. Yeah, we had an image that was huge that was embedded in a popular GitHub repo's README. So that image being deployed through us was insane. So we had one day where we did 145 gigs. But for the rest of the month, if I literally trim that one day out, it was 6 gigs.
For us, we also had a one weird day where it was like 55 gigabytes. I don't even remember what that day was.
I was around 30 gigs, but yes, same difference.
That was that. And then we are about, okay, the total is 200 gigabytes for the month, and it's about 5 gigabytes a day, roughly.
Yeah, we're at about a gigabyte a day and 30 for a month where we don't have something stupid going on.
Yeah, because I was just like, I wanted to go see if I was under it looks like I'd fit in the Pro Vercel pricing, which is not bad.
Yeah, I have a feeling if you were to tweet about it too, you could get them down to find some way to make it cheaper. I feel like they would be upset not having you as a customer if you made it why.
Okay, I was trying to find what was the thing that I thought was alarming. Okay, this is the thing I found alarming, okay? Mm-hmm. So it's $20 a month per user. You know, per user is rough, but whatever. For 1 terabyte of bandwidth. And you're like, all right, that's like that's good. Like that's reasonable. But if you hover over the terabyte of bandwidth and you put
$40 per extra 100 gigs.
Exactly. That's scary when the initial thing's 20 and that's for 1 terabyte. So you're like, what in the world? Every 100 gigabyte after that is $40. Like, whoa, that's going to stack up. So basically, I think that was literally the thing that scared me. And I was like, I don't even know what my gigabyte number is. What if we hit the 1 terabyte really fast? And then we're like getting shreked. But we're like well under a terabyte. Like we should be under a terabyte for a bit. That we're going to be okay.
Usually the cost there, what it's coming from is you have images in your source code that are being deployed on Lambdas, and that's just expensive. Like if you're not putting your like assets on something like S3 yourself and then embedding them that way, you could rack up a decent amount of bandwidth just from requests having images in them. The alternative is you can use Next's image pre-processing stuff in the image optimization, but that's expensive as hell too. So
take your poison.
Yeah, they moved it to 1,000 source images a month where it was 100 before, so that's a huge bump. They 10x'd it. It's only $9 for another 1,000. That's not too bad.
See, give me $9 for 1 terabyte. That's what I'm asking for.
That's like that's S3 pricing.
Exactly. Well, pow. Actually, I mean, I think like here's the other thing. I'm probably using something more expensive because it uses CloudFront in front. It just happens to have credits. Like credits are a beautiful thing until you overwrite them.
Yep. Especially as a YC company, there are a lot of credits and like free deals and things we get. And I feel like some of the value you get on those deals is so absurd that I think their specific goal is to get you used to not paying for the service and racking up crazy bills so that as soon as your credits are over, like this is pretty public info. AWS gives YC companies like during their batch $100,000 of AWS credit that expires in a year. So their goal to get you to spend $100,000 in your first year, because if you do that, you're going to spend way more than that the next year.
Right. Especially when you have more than 0 users.
Yes.
If you were spending 100K with 0 users, you're spending 200K with some users.
That's like what? Like 2 accidental Kubernetes deployments, 1 Terraform config that's bad?
Exactly.
Relatable. I don't want to keep you for too long, especially if you're not feeling great. I'm going to do one last ask for questions if anybody wants to ask them before we start wrapping up. Did you have anything we didn't talk about as well, Ben, that you were hoping to get to via a fellow founder, creator, engineering convo, anything you want to pick my brain about?
Let me think if something hits. I didn't have anything specific, but I'll like pick my brain for a second and see if there's anything that comes to mind. Yuri said you dislike normalized front-end caches, which makes sense because they're bad for performance.
Yep. I like the caching to be, I like most things to be as close to the component as possible. Kind of sucks that like component level data fetching is as bad as it is, but I'm excited for a future where you can at a component level determine what data is needed, and then at a compiler level or route level actually do that data loading. And I think we're pretty close to that, especially with some of the changes I've been seeing for Next.js, as well as all the cool stuff that Remix did and innovated. I think we're nearing a future where you tell a component which data it needs with a hook, and then the
Yeah.
page loads with data and components all rendered correctly.
Man, you sound like Relay.
I love Relay. I really wish Relay was usable. I genuinely do.
Oof.
It's such
I have not actually tried Relay, so I can only.
The smartest developers I know, a handful of them use Relay, but I've never met a dumb person using Relay. And I think that's my biggest hesitation is I need all of my tech to be stupid proof because I'm fucking stupid. And Relay can do unreal things performance wise, compiler wise, and DX wise. But you have to build so much shit. I know. Do you know who Jane Wong is? The Twitter hacker who Jane's an old friend. I fucking love her. She gave me access to her blog's code base a while back. And just for like her blog for her fun tech demos and shit, she had like 2,000 lines of Redux related like code gen functions and TypeScript she had written to make Relay work for her blog. And it was incredible. Like if she open sourced that, it would make Relay way more usable. But that's the kind of thing Relay devs do is they build a whole library into their code base just so they can use Relay.
Yeah. I didn't want to understand Relay at that level, and that was actually kind of I like got that vibe without actually like dipping my toe in Relay. I was like, yeah, that's not my can of worms. Oh, and I do have one question for you that I just thought of.
Oh boy.
So you are very much, I would say, like Ping is a kind of like related to Twitch in the sense of a lot of Twitch streamers use Ping.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you think about it in the world where Twitch is making some like, decisions you're not exactly happy with? You're seeing a lot of turmoil with streamers and like them like wanting to change platforms or any of that. Does that worry you at all of like where you guys are positioned with Ping? Or is it something where you're like, you're kind of always going to need Ping no matter what platform you're streaming on? And you guys are just like, yeah, if you guys want to F over Twitch, you don't even care about like what Twitch is doing.
Actually,
like how much does like Twitch affect you basically? I'm just curious.
Emotionally, very much so. And this has been a hard thing. Like, and this is one of the many reasons I'm so happy to have co-founders, because of the co-founders, I'm the one who worked at Twitch and I'm the one who's really emotionally invested in Twitch. So when they do stupid shit, like they're cloning most of Ping's core features with a new product called Guest Star. And it's insulting as shit because they took the engineers I hired at Twitch from 7 different teams and pulled all of them off to build the super team to clone my product. It's just like such a slap in the face, such a like a spiritual hit for me that I hate. But realistically, all the things you just said are true. More and more people are looking to diversify, potentially leave the platform. And what we've built at Ping is not platform specific at all. So what we did is we were already working on adding a few more auth methods. We had YouTube, or Google, Twitter, and Twitch, because YouTube auth's a whole different beast that we have to get approved for. We're working on it, but Google's effectively YouTube auth, and we had Twitter and Twitch. We added Dropbox, Microsoft, and Discord. And when we added those new options, and Facebook. And when we added those options, we were going to keep Twitch as like the big one at the top. But we decided with these changes, with the current sentiment, that we would no longer make Twitch like this big top, the thing you sign in with. And yeah, I think that's the biggest like impact we've had as a business, other than me being down all the time, is we changed the login page so Twitch wasn't so prominent. But that's about it. Like half of our users aren't on Twitch. That's always been the case. I personally am very invested in Twitch still to this day, even with all the shit going on. There's nothing I want more than for Twitch to get its shit together and succeed still. But sadly, it feels less likely every day. I will say, I don't know how public I've been about this. I did have a conversation with the CEO of Twitch over the weekend, and he restored a lot of my faith, and I am more hopeful than I was before. But I am still very scared, and I think a lot of the sentiment's been killed forever. That all said, the last like 3 days, they've put out so many cool new products, announcements, and everything else related to TwitchCon. And holy shit, I've never seen this many features that feel like they understand creators' needs come out in any window at Twitch, much less like a week of time. And I'm really excited for a future where Twitch is doing that more regularly, is more involved with the community again. It feels more like the company I joined in 2017.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Satisfying answer.
Yeah. I figured that was probably the case. I was curious because I've been watching all the Twitch stuff as well.
Yeah. I'd say that like the more interesting directional changes we're making at Ping are around the trends we're seeing both like in the market and also like in my own channel. Like I'm still a Twitch streamer. I happen to have a YouTube channel and most of my Twitch audience happens to come from YouTube. But like at my heart, I'm a Twitch streamer. That's what I'm doing this for. And all of my content will be done on and made with Ping on Twitch. And we're realizing that you don't grow your audience on Twitch. Twitch is not a place you go to blow up and make a huge like income and meet all these like people. You do that on other platforms with discovery. Twitch is the bottom of your funnel. It competes more with OnlyFans and less with TikTok and YouTube. And as such, it's really important that we can help those creators continue to grow their funnels, continue to succeed on other platforms to pull people in. And a lot of what we're excited about building at Ping now is tools that help creators reuse their content, work with their editors to create content more effectively, and find success on those other platforms and really build their funnel to bring them more success. And those tools are going to be less things like a live collab call app, more like a tool to help you find the funniest faces you made to make a thumbnail, or a tool to help you find parts in a VOD that you want to send to your editor to make videos of. Stuff like that helps you diversify your content portfolio and yourself rather than just the platform you're streaming on.
Smart.
These are the things I think about every day.
Same, but not on a business level.
Interesting. Yeah, I will say, just as somebody who talks to a lot of devs, a lot of founders, and a lot of creators, that the average creator has a much better understanding of the space they're in than any dev or like founder does on average. Like you can find a random creator with like 1,000 followers on Twitter that goes live to 15 viewers that's been doing it for 2 years. And you could sit down and talk with them, and the depth of their understanding of the space and what they're doing and what is and isn't working, even at that small level, is incredible. They usually have some like deeply set misconception that you have to get over to hit that next level. But the understanding they have of where they are is shocking compared to other spaces.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people building, like I'm like glad that you like got more into the like content creation because you're able to like feel it firsthand. I feel like a lot of creator kind startups are unfortunately not making content themselves, and unless you're not creating content yourself, you can hear the stories, but it's like a little bit different than actually like being in that that struggle, if you will.
Absolutely. What I see when I look at the space is there's a bunch of like Squarespace type things and Wixes where like StreamYard lets you drag and drop people and go live on LinkedIn. Cool. Great. I'm sure that like the squeaky wheels that really wanted to like do their business streams on LinkedIn to 4 viewers are really happy with their $15 a month subscription. But that's not what we're building for. We're not making it easier to do your first stream the same way like companies trying to make it easier to start your first company aren't bringing a whole lot of value to the world, because like the hard part isn't starting. The hard part is following through and continuing to do it. And all of these companies, like the amount of founders I've talked to in the creator space that are like, yeah, I tried making a YouTube and it was really hard. So I stopped making a YouTube and instead made a company so it would have been easier to do my first stream. And now they have this product that's for people who didn't have it in them to stream, to do a stream, because that's the founder of the company, somebody who didn't want to do the hard thing. So they started a company for other people who didn't want to do the thing. And we're trying really hard to be the opposite of that, where we're for people who have done the hard thing. They know why it sucks and they want it to be better. And I had to experience that myself. It's the same reason AWS was so successful, because they were building Amazon first. They built this very complex product that had lots of technical issues and constraints. And when they solved those internally, they realized others would have them too, so they could sell those solutions externally. When you are solving for problems you have, you will always do better than when you're solving for problems you think others have.
100%.
Yeah, I love this stuff. And I also love that creators see the effort that we're putting in here. That's something that was really important to me. I wanted very strictly to not be another one of those founders that just showed up here because they think there's money. I'll be straightforward. And this is probably going to, like, if there's any potential investors in here, you're going to lowball me the next time we talk because the creator economy is dead. There is not a lot of money in this space right now. It like was the hot thing 2 years ago for some reason, and it's just not succeeding at the moment. What we're focused on isn't this idea of a creator economy where creators suddenly start making a bunch of money because TV dies. What we're building into is people who exist, who have problems making content at the speeds and quality they want to, making them more successful doing what they're doing right now. Thank you. No, I love these rants, and I totally agree. Like, having founder conversations is so essential. And yeah, I'm curious, like, when you look at the gaming world, what do you see, and how are you steering Void Pet to both learn and like do different from the space that as it exists?
Well, one thing is I knew very little about the gaming space when I came into it because I never followed it from a industry perspective, but I followed it from a like obviously I was watching like Twitch streams and I was into gaming. I was not necessarily the person that was playing every day, but I have a brother who's like a Twitch streamer and like games a lot, so I'd always hear a lot from him. And I was on that side of the thing where I'd like casually be hearing stuff that would happen in Twitch and whatnot, or in gaming, or what new games are coming out. So I came in like fresh from the, like how to actually make a game. One thing is I hate that, as we talked about iteration cycles earlier, that a lot of gaming is like, yeah, you spend 2 years in a shell and then out pops out a game, and hopefully that is a good game and hopefully it's a hit. And if it's not a hit, like, uh-oh, that's terrible. So like one of the big things that we did differently was like build it and people can play it like as early as possible and play it as we make changes to it. So that's one thing. There's been a lot of like pain in doing that because you churn a ton of users because they're trying an unfinished product, but there's also been a ton of learnings from that. And I think I just know myself as a founder who would struggle if I went stealth mode for 2 years. So that's, I'd say, one very big one. The second very big one was deciding to make a website instead of an app or a desktop app. This was really came from two reasons. One, we were not ever planning on making like a graphics intensive game. So we didn't have the constraint of needing to be on one of those platforms. And also my expertise was in web anyway. And it turned out to be a really good decision because half of our players happen to be mobile and half of our players happen to be desktop. I did not think that was going to be the case, but coming in, it turns out if they have the option to play on the desktop, they like it. The game is more of like a mobile game in the sense like the experience is for someone playing on their phone. But half our players like to play on their computer too, and they like that option. So those are the two big ones I'd say, is the web and making the game and publishing it more frequently. And there's pros and cons to both. I don't even think like strictly what we did is like strictly better, and we're going to see if it pans out. But I think it was like, I don't regret the choices based on like the situation and like the type of founder that I am.
This is super interesting, and I haven't had a good game dev convo in a while. I love this stuff so much. Something you're doing there that I've noticed the greater game dev industry catching on to is, for you, desktop is big, like percentage of user wise, which is kind of rare, especially like for a console game that's also on mobile that also has a PC version. Usually like the percentage of players and the percentage of hours is not as high on PC as other platforms. However, the hardest core users, the evangelists, and the people who are going to like make content about it, share it with other people, like the ones who, not the users who you want for money, but the users who you want for fame to eventually make money. Those users really appreciate having a good desktop client, be it like a game they install via Steam or a website they can go to. And by serving them well, but not over optimizing for them, you're able to get a lot of like free, good, like faith and marketing out of them.
Right. I like to call these users the degenerates.
Yep.
Although I don't say it too much because I don't want to offend them. But
I'm a degen. I say this all the time.
Exactly. Some degenerates are so degenerate that they own the term, they love the term, in which case they're like proudly degenerate, that are like, yeah, they want to like the most optimal way to use the thing, and they're going to be using the thing and like, yeah, I don't care if it's supposed to be played on my phone. If you give me a website on my computer, I will play it, and I'll play it while I'm playing in this other browser on my other account too. Like, fantastic. I'm glad we gave you the option.
Yep, I totally agree. And it's like those degen users, so many companies hate them and try to avoid them. And somebody even earlier was saying, like, don't pay too much attention to the squeaky wheel. It can kill your business. Yes, I agree. But if you can make that squeaky wheel squeak about you rather than at you, it can be very powerful if you can flip that dynamic. And we've turned some
That is
very
true.
loud people into very loud advocates of our first product at Ping. And God, when we get further with that, actually, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Something I've found at Ping is it's almost better to have some bugs than no bugs, because if you have a bug, a user's affected, they hit us up about it and we fix it in 7 minutes and they feel like they were part of that and like we were responsive and gave them a good experience there. The amount of good faith that builds is way higher than if we had no bugs at all.
I agree with that. And I also think that's true for content as well.
Yes.
I think in both cases, it's yeah, like you said, they feel good about bringing the bug up and making the product better. So I agree. I don't think, and here's the great thing, just based on the way I code, the bugs are naturally there anyway. So like, I didn't even have to plant them in there. Like it's a symbiosis, like, both of us are winning without me needing to like change anything that I'm doing too.
Absolutely. I love that so much. I think that being prepared for the bugs and being involved with the users for when those things happen is so much more valuable than like almost anything else you can be doing as a founder. Even like when you have a whole team, like I have a team of engineers and I'm still the one who jumps on bugs about half the time. Not because like I'm the most technical or the best at doing it. I'm probably slower than a lot of the team. But there's something powerful about the CEO of the companies whose product you're using showing up in your Twitch chat saying, "Hey, I heard you were having problems. So sorry about that. We just fixed it. If you refresh, it should be good now." Like the vibe that I've seen from that and how people feel like seeing a verified Twitch account that gets thousands of viewers showing up in their chat saying, "Hey, thank you for the report. We just got that fixed." Like those moments matter so much more than anything you can do with the product.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And give them that magic moment.
And that's our edge as founders of smaller companies. Like we get to do things that Ubisoft and Nintendo can't. Like when's the last time a person had a problem with Pokemon and somebody at Nintendo replied?
Exactly. Never.
Never, ever. Yeah.
The inverse happens.
Absolutely. The other thing you touched on here that I absolutely love is like kind of back on the earlier topic of the feedback loop and how close you can get to getting feedback earlier without having to spend 2 years making a game as a new game developer just to learn nobody wants to play it. I'm lucky that I've had a lot of playtesting opportunities in my life. Most recently, my favorite game of all time, Outer Wilds, had a DLC, and I got to go in and playtest the DLC for my favorite game ever, and I got to be the first person to beat it by over a year before it ended up coming out because they were learning so much through the playtests. But they found
Right.
like bringing on streamers specifically was super valuable because we're used to talking our thoughts and describing everything that's in our brains. And the value they got out of that in steering the direction of the game, but also NDAing me and forcing me to not talk about it for a year plus is so valuable for them. And like what I saw, it like now that the game's out, like I can literally see the impact that my dumbass had by making so many stupid mistakes when I played through that early version. And as valuable
Right.
as all that was, the much more valuable part was the sentiment they got. So the version I played had like a white planet with a bunch of like brown walls that were dropped in as default Unity assets. And then a year later, I saw all of these things now have textures and like stories and a game, but the gameplay loop and the vibe they could test out way earlier and then steer the direction of. But until you have all of those resources, like you have a person who's the director of playtesting for your game studio that was recommended to you by the game publisher you've been working with for 5+ years and setting up all of the things you need for all that. Even before then, Alex would just call you on Discord, send you a zip of the build and have you play it with it that way. And
Yeah.
I think there's so much value there. I'm curious if you've tried more like closed loop playtests where you pick a few power users, give them access to new staging versions of the game to get feedback on new mechanics early.
So I have not done that, but I feel like that's something I want to start doing because I think a lot of the problems that we had, I think we went too much on the extreme of like getting user feedback, that it's almost too much and not closed enough, that I want to dial it back just a tad So it's closer to that point where like, all right, you have like the next day or whatever, or like there's like it's gated and like a little bit more guardrail of what they're trying, what they're giving feedback on. So the answer is no, but I want to.
Yeah. I think there's two big benefits. The first one you touched on a lot there, which is like making sure things are working as expected and that people have the opportunity to chat with you about those new things once you've committed. I think the more valuable like that thing you can get from it's a step earlier where you're not sure if an idea is going to work yet or not. So you do a super hacky like prototype version of it. And maybe you don't even code it. You just draw it in Figma, screen share it to them and have them click buttons and see how they feel about these new things before you even start the development. I think that type of feedback loop can be super valuable as you're sketching out and trying new things.
Right. And also, if you let a user play with like the thing for too long, they almost get too attached to it,
Yes.
even if they're not doing the behavior that I want them to be doing. And so I can release something and think it's a failed feature, even though there's some amount of users that enjoy it that are like now super attached to it because I let them play with it for too long. So the mistake was like giving it to them for too much time that they're like, now this is my baby. Like this is the thing they like so much. And it's hard to rip it out after you do that.
We have that so much at Ping with like, because production workflows are so jank and full of duct tape that we now get thrown at a wall and duct taped to it. And then we make a slight change in the shape of the product. Like, wait, but that cuts the duct tape on this edge. Like, oh, sorry, we didn't realize that people were like relying on the color that things flash to determine when people were talking for a weird integration they were building. Or one fun one that somebody was writing custom CSS for the embeds, which I fucking love. And they were targeting based on the Tailwind class names we were using to get to a specific element. And then when the Tailwind class names changed, they couldn't target it anymore. They complained about it. It's like, oh, what element are you targeting? And I went and added a custom ID to that element so they can always hit it when they want to. Like, if you want to write custom CSS for our product for your streams, go nuts. Absolutely. But like, I need to know that so I can put a hook in for you to grab rather than you using arbitrary Tailwind class names to hope you find the right element.
Right. No, that's exactly it. You don't realize how much users are using something until you take it out sometimes. And the absence of it is what I've definitely had to like monkey patch some stuff and put it back in when I'm like, oh crap, that's actually vital. And I did not realize it was vital. Uh-oh.
Yeah, the amount of I'll be honest, I've been surprised. Like, we've removed a few things and didn't get much negative feedback. We also will regularly feature flag out something, and we feature flag a lot now, which is definitely a good thing for how custom our different user setups are. And like, we have a big feature that I've been using for all my streams for 2 months now. We originally deployed it for the Austin show Lover House because he had like 15 guests and he wanted to move them from place to place throughout the stream. Before, all of the embeds were like, a URL represents Ben, a URL represents Theo. Maybe this URL represents Ben and Bryn as one URL, but there was like query params that shows who was in what URL. So we moved to a centralized system with webhooks, or WebSockets, so I could dynamically change who's where on the stream. So like, if I right now, oh, that'll actually be a very interesting like infinite loop if I send myself. I was going to try and do a self send to show it, but I can do that quick. So I'm switching right now. Ben sees a return feed. Now Ben sees just me. If I hit the little replace guest button that we added, I can dynamically swap. So I should have myself next to me instead of Ben. I don't know why that didn't work. That's concerning. Never mind. Good thing we haven't shipped this feature yet. We'll fix that later.
Guys, it's a bug in prod.
We have a lot of those, especially for features we haven't shipped. But the goal of this feature is, rather than swapping URLs, you could, in the UI, send people to and from different places, which makes it a lot easier to manage very dynamic shows. Where before we were building for like the podcast you do every week, where the 2 guests are always the same. The product worked great for that. Yeah. But like, this feature is going to fundamentally change the way you orchestrate your show. And while we have a legacy mode in it, so you could still do things the old way if you want to, the UX is different enough that we want to be careful with this rollout. So right now it's feature flagged on a few of our power users. They've been liking it a lot. Right. Once we iron out the last set of bugs, we'll probably start a granular rollout, or I'll do an opt-in or an opt-out in settings so you can choose if it's on or not. But yeah, the goal of what we're doing here is building a better workflow without breaking existing workflows, and learning to be cautious of that in a creator space is really challenging. Once you're the thing you're selling or providing for users doesn't have one entry point or exit point. It has an unknown number that people are doing all these crazy things with. Yeah. I'm thankful our users are so technical and good at talking because they can describe the things they're doing very well.
That's true.
Yeah.
When they can actually say what's going wrong and like good instructions, that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Huge underrated perk of the creator space is that the average creator knows how to talk, whereas the average developer does not, and the average gamer chooses not to.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm running
But
out
they'll
of
complain about it.
I'm running out of questions. I am seeing if anybody else had interesting ones. One last big call for questions, and obviously if you have anything, I'd love to hear. Oh, Flutter. We have not talked about Flutter yet. Would love to hear your thoughts on Flutter.
Gross.
Gross? Cool. Yeah. I think on like those levels, we are very, very aligned. I actually talked with the founder of like the Flutter team at Google the same weekend I was talking about before, like at the YC event. And he was trying to build a modern web browser, and then it just kind of became Flutter. And he seemed very conflicted on how to feel about it, which was interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah. If y'all want to know why Flutter is gross, I have at least 2 videos on that on my channel. You could feel free to check out. Thoughts on React Native then? I'm curious.
I'm a fan. I used it this morning.
Yeah. Expo in particular makes React Native very, very pleasant to work with. I would say like React Native itself feels almost like Relay in the sense you have to know what the fuck you're doing really hard to make it work. But Expo knows what they're doing, and they've provided all of those like hard parts for us.
Yeah, dumb people can use Expo.
Yes. Expo is Theo proof.
There you go.
Yeah. Kind of want to add that to the brand, Theo proofing. That's why I like TRPC so much. Unlike GraphQL, it's Theo proof.
True.
Not seen too many other great questions. Oh, people are asking about the Gatsby create React app diagram.
Oh, that was a while ago.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on Twitter a bit, but like I updated the diagram and you just were like, yeah, that looks right now.
Yeah, no, I think you just made a up-to-date / better version of what you should be using now. So
yeah, I am happy that the narrative around create React app has shifted as fast as it has, because I've been hating on it for a while. I'm uniquely burned where like my first front end task at Twitch after 2 years of back end was updating a big repo from Webpack 2 to Webpack 4. Like that's how I got into front end, and it was a create React app repo. So I started on the correct foot of hating the absolute shit out of create React app, and since then have been waiting for the world to realize that this is a bad boilerplate and starter, because what they did, it's very much the squeaky wheel problem where every single thing any person ever asked in an issue, they added somewhere. And the result is like it polyfills the node crypto library and all these other like random node modules. It has a multi-thousand line Webpack config that does crazy shit in it. And there is literally no way in hell you're ever going to SSR CRA without like having a PhD in weird JavaScript bullshit.
Yeah. I've stopped using Create React App and haven't missed it. So,
what do you reach for now when you start a new project? Like, what's the NPM command you run to knit something?
Create next app.
Good stuff.
That's usually anyway. I guess it depends what, you know.
What about the --ts?
Well, of course, that's like, you know, that's in my autocomplete, you know, like I start writing, create, and it's just there. I don't actually type that part.
I'm going to challenge you for the next one. Use create T3 app. Even if you turn off everything else, it's a better create next app at this point. You can add the other things if you want, but the default TypeScript version of create next app isn't TypeScript very much. They forget to install the TypeScript package, and it's certainly not type safe. So yeah, I highly recommend, like, even if just to like I stopped using create next app. Every time I try to use it on stream for something, it breaks in some stupid way. I just use create T3 app for everything now because it's still next. It's just a better template.
Right.
Oh,
all right, I will give it a try.
We also have type safe environment variables in it too, which is super useful.
Oh, fantastic. I made I want to see how those are done because I did a library like a very long time ago to like fix that for me. but it's like a little clunky how I did it. So
Yeah.
I will check that out.
There's a couple libraries that do it now. The creator of one of them's also the lead of TRPC. He contributed a recommended way of doing it before he had the package. So we're basically using our version of what is now a package. The TLDR is like there's a file that it has to be JS. So we use MJS with type definition, so it's still type safe within there. And it's just a list of the variable names, and we use Zod to validate it. So you say if it's a string, a URL, whatever there, and now you can import from that directly in the TypeScript code safely. And when you try to deploy, the errors are so good. And we have this happen all the time where somebody's like, hey, I started a create T3 app, and when I went to deploy it, it didn't work. So we say, okay, show us the error log from the deploy. And right there in bright red text says, you forgot these 3 environment variables. It's so nice.
All right, I will give it a try, and I will let you know.
Please do. Yeah. Did you see any other questions you wanted to jump on?
I haven't tried Solid, so I can't comment on that. And I think that's the only question I see in this batch of comments. So
I'm curious if there's
we're good.
Anything else in the JavaScript world that's caught your eye recently. Like, what are the most exciting things?
Obviously Bun, but I haven't even tried Bun yet. I'd say like that's like probably the most recent thing that's caught my eye. But you already showed me the like what's it all called? TRPC. Yeah. Yep. That's like not really catching my eye anymore. Like my eyes already seen it. So I'd say like Bun's like probably the last thing that caught my eye. Obviously like the stable diffusion, all the like image libraries, but that's like not exactly JavaScript. So
I am so excited about the AI image stuff in particular. Yeah. It's going to be really cool. Like as a person who struggles a lot on my thumbnails, if I could type in a thumbnail idea, it gives me a rough prototype and I can go fix that up in Photoshop. That sounds incredible.
Oh, that would be great.
Oh boy, somebody linked a... That is a fantastic tweet. How did we not see that? This was 2 hours ago. What? I need to find an easy way to share this on stream. One sec.
Oh my god.
Game cap, window capture. Oh no, not the overlay. Let's hide that quick. Window capture. Oh, do I have that in a different thing? Oh no, here it is. Window. There we go. Yeah. High quality memes. Ben Awad. Yeah. Why didn't he make one of these for Jared when Jared was doing interviews? I think that's all.
I actually love buns.
Yeah, do you know the story of how Bun got named?
I have no idea. Was he eating buns?
No. I have another one of my good friends from like the old like hackathon hacker shit posting Facebook groups. She has a bunny named Bundle and was trying to get Jared to name Bun after her. He wouldn't. Uh-oh. So she settled for naming it after her bunny named Bundle, which was the perfect name for what Bun was becoming at the time. And it stuck.
Right.
So Bun is named after my friend Kip's bunny.
Oh, and does Bun even have any bunnies on its landing page?
Nope.
Or GitHub? Sad. Nope. He needs to add a little thing on that.
Somebody needs to add ears to the Bun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was very proud of Kip when she told me that story, because Bun was like not out for anyone to use yet. It was just like a thing he would post tweets about the performance of every couple of weeks. And
right.
I was pretty bought in already. And then he dropped it into the crazy rush happened. And that was nuts to see, because like I've kept an eye on Bun for almost 2 years now. And all of a sudden it was the hot topic. I think it's like the 3rd or 4th most popular video I've done on YouTube was me talking about Bun.
Right.
I think that's all I have. I guess I have one last question myself. Is there any space on TikTok for another thirst trap software dev?
Of course. There's literally like no one else is doing it besides me, so there's obviously plenty of room. So please start posting today. That should be your daily content too.
I am very tempted. As the best dressed software dev, it's about time we take more advantage of it.
Oh boy, big talk.
It's not very big talk. The average software dev wears a free t-shirt and jeans their mom bought them 12 years ago. It's like here you go with a good analogy.
That's how you recognize a fellow software engineer.
Yeah, or Primogen's hoodie.
I see you and I'm like, man, is that guy a thirst trap or a programmer? I don't know. Like I get confused, you know?
It's really funny because whenever somebody doesn't agree with me and they don't have like a technical reason for it, they could just lean on that. Like there's, I forgot the name of the dude on fucking Twitter, but there's some like startup shitposter that does everything in PHP who, whenever like I point out that his recommendations are bad, replies with, "Oh, look at budget Jake Paul out here who thinks he can program." And I reply with,
Budget
"Go
Jake Paul.
gentrify another country and call it a startup." Ratio him and he deletes his fucking tweet. Yeah, that's
so funny in an ironic way.
yeah. It's
Oh,
funny how
man.
like being not a stereotypical looking nerd quickly becomes an insult when the nerd thing is hard to disagree with.
They're jealous.
Absolutely.
They are.
And it's so much more apparent when they're talking about how I dress than when they're talking about what I said. I like, as you mentioned before, it's so nice having people like actually correcting the things you did wrong. But if the thing you're
Right.
mad about is that I look good while I talk about why your favorite framework is bad, not that your favorite framework is bad, that's your problem, not mine.
That is true. They need to go to the salon and up their looks too.
People really wanted us to talk about forms. Do you have a quick form take before we sign off?
I mean, I have not updated my form live. I've been using Formic, haven't updated it in years because it does enough of the job. It's not the best. It's not the worst. It's like decent.
Yeah. Did you know the guy who made Formix now doing doing a turbo repo at Vercel?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's been really
Jared.
awesome watching Jared's come up too. I need to have him on the show. We were chatting about it a while back, and I haven't found a time just yet. But yeah, the turbo repo stuff's really exciting. I think it solves a whole category of problems that I'm running into a lot now as we build bigger code bases. But it's also less fun to talk about because most of the people who are like coming to our YouTube channels to learn how to build their next thing don't have a next thing that's big enough to need turbo repo yet.
Right. Like, yeah, you got to have like more than like 5 X packages. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all I got. Thank you so much. Before you said you were only going to be here for an hour, and now you've been here for 2.5. So I appreciate it a ton, man.
Oh, well, that was all I could commit to. I've been like actually feeling pretty good right now. So
Good shit.
I'm glad we can make this happen. Scheduling is difficult in this day and age. So thanks for having me.
And thank you so much. Sorry for my chaos on the scheduling side as well. I think you're the person I've had to like move times on the most by a lot. And I appreciate
part of it was me too. So
you had to move once. I had to move like 3 times. So no, I fucked this one up much more so. I love to call out my guests for being bad at scheduling, but this one was more me than anybody. So I'll take the L.
All right, I'll let you have it then. You win.
I appreciate it. Let me take one loss. Well, thank you again so much. I'm going to cut us to the BRB screen really quick and run an ad break. I'll be back in like 2 to 3 minutes, guys. So don't leave just yet. We have a lot of fun JavaScript stuff to talk about. So be right back, y'all.
Stream.
Actually, one more thing. Do you have anything you want to shout out before we leave? Void Pet link, probably?
No, honestly, you can just Google my name. You'll find stuff. It's good.
Good enough for me. We'll see y'all back in a bit.